Today, I have 3 hours of scary thriller, psychological horror that I feel could all be movies. So sit back, grab some popcorn. If you're putting this on to go to sleep, I don't know, take a melatonin gummy. My point being, we're in for a wild ride. So I hope you guys enjoy. The first story today is from r/no-sleep from user I'm Funerals. Every destroyed house I investigate contains the same untouched room. I've been a structural damage assessor for going on 10 years now. The job is exactly what it sounds like. A building gets destroyed, whether it's fire, flood, gas explosion, structural collapse, whatever, and once the emergency crews are done and the scene is cleared and everyone who had feelings about the building has gone home to have those feelings somewhere else, I go in. I walk the structure and document what's standing and what isn't. I file a report that tells the county, the contractor, or the insurance company whether the building can be salvaged or needs to come down. I go in alone, I come out alone. I write the report, and I move on to the next one. 10 years of that. Dozens of destroyed buildings. It doesn't get to you the way people expect. It goes the other way. After a while, a destroyed building is just a destroyed building. You stop seeing what it used to be, and you start seeing load-bearing walls and the path of least resistance through something that's trying to fall. I'm telling you all this now because I need someone else to know. The first house was in February. A gas leak took out the kitchen and most of the ground floor, and left the upstairs looking like nothing happened except for the smoke damage on the ceiling and the way every window was blown out. I've seen it 100 times. The explosion travels the path of least resistance, and everything above it just sits there, intact, structurally sound, and completely exposed. I documented the ground floor, noted the compromised load-bearing wall on the north side, and went upstairs to check the structural integrity of the second floor. 3 bedrooms. 2 of them were what I expected. Smoke damage with cracked drywall where the ceiling had shifted, and furniture thrown around from the blast pressure. The 3rd bedroom at the end of the hall was untouched. A made bed with a dark green comforter pulled tight. A nightstand with a glass of water and an ashtray. A pack of cigarettes next to a lighter. I noted it in my report. Structurally sound room, personal effects undisturbed. Recommend contents evaluation before demolition. I photographed it and moved on. I didn't think about it again. Not until the second house. The second house was in March. This one was an electrical fire on the east side of the county, in an older neighborhood. The fire started in the walls and gutted the structure from the inside before anyone smelled smoke. By the time the trucks arrived, there wasn't much left of the first floor or the east wing. The west wing was standing. I went through the west wing room by room, documented the smoke penetration, the heat damage to the ceiling joists, and the way the floor was soft in 3 spots where the subfloor had been compromised. At the end of the hall, there was a bedroom. I opened the door. A made bed with a dark green comforter pulled tight. A nightstand with a glass of water and an ashtray. A pack of cigarettes next to the lighter. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I took out my phone and looked at the photos from the February house. Same comforter, same ashtray, same arrangement on the nightstand. I did what any reasonable person would do, which was try to talk myself out of it. Dark green comforters are common. Cheap lighters and ashtrays are common. A lot of smokers keep their cigarettes on their nightstand. Coincidence. Old housing stock, similar taste and decor, nothing unusual. I wrote the report and moved on. The 3rd house was in April. Flood damage from a burst main. Downtown, one of those narrow 3-story buildings that used to be commercial on the ground floor and residential above. The ground floor was gutted. The 1st and 2nd floors had significant water damage, warped floors, compromised drywall, and mold already starting in the corners. The 3rd floor at the end of the hall. I opened the door, and I felt something tighten in my chest. The same goddamn room. But the bed wasn't made as tightly this time. The comforter was pulled up, but there was a slight depression in the pillow, like someone had been lying there and gotten up and made the bed quickly, not quite smoothing everything back. And the ashtray had a cigarette in it, half smoked. The ash was intact, like it had been set down and left there. I took photographs for a long time. I measured the room. I checked the wallpaper pattern against the photos from the 2 previous houses. The same faded patch near the window. The same place where the paper had lifted slightly at the seam near the door. I went home and I Googled the wallpaper pattern. It was discontinued in 1987. The manufacturer doesn't exist anymore. I filed my report. I decided not to mention the room. I didn't sleep well that night. The fourth house was in May. I almost didn't go in. I sat in my truck in front of the building for 15 minutes before I could make myself open the door. Fire damage, residential, outer edge of the county, single-family home. I went through the motions on the lower floors, documented everything, took my photos, wrote my notes in shorthand. Upstairs, at the end of the hall, I opened the door. Of course, the same everything. Except the mattress. I know my own mattress. I bought it 4 years ago after my back started giving me trouble from a pinched nerve. It was my mattress. I tried to think about all the reasonable explanations, and I couldn't find one. I took a photo of the mattress tag. I went home and checked my own mattress tag, and it was the same model, same manufacturer date. I poured myself a drink and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Then I told myself there were probably thousands of those mattresses in the county and went to bed. The fifth house was last week. I knew before I opened the door at the end of the hall. I'd known since the fourth house that this was where it was going. I opened the door anyway. Some part of me needed to see it. The room was mine. Completely. The landscape print I've had since my mom died, and I kept it because she gave it to me, not because I like it. The specific bleach stain on the fitted sheet from the summer when I spilled cleaning solution and didn't notice until laundry day. All of it, in a destroyed building on the east side of Yoseki, in a room that smelled like clover. The bed was occupied. I couldn't see a face. The figure was on its side, turned away, the comforter pulled up. But I could see it was my build, my hair on the pillow, the way I sleep when I'm exhausted, one arm tucked under it. I stood in that doorway for a long time. Then I closed the door very quietly and walked back down the hall and out of the building and got into my truck. I drove home. I'm writing this from my kitchen table, and it's 11 o'clock at night. I came home tonight, walked upstairs, stood in my bedroom doorway, and I looked at my room for a long time. The bed is made. I never make my bed. The nightstand is clear. No charger cable, no glass of water, no clutter. The bleach-stained sheet is gone. The landscape print my mom gave me is gone. The mattress is made up with sheets I don't recognize, tucked tight at the corners. My bedroom looks like a room nobody lives in. It looks like the room I found the first time, untouched. Like someone just stepped out. I don't know where I've been sleeping. I don't know how long I've been gone. I'm going to call my friend tomorrow. We're supposed to get beers on Saturday anyway. I think I just need someone to tell me I seem like myself. I think this one could be like a horror movie because it starts with something that's super ordinary and makes it feel like it could happen to literally anybody. You really just don't know who can be trusted. Anyways, here is the next story. It's from r/no-sleep from user fartoday9069. Something doesn't feel right outside the house. I haven't left my house in a few years. I've lost count of how many exactly, to be honest. After the first few months, it kind of stopped bothering me, as well as I didn't really feel the need to be outside. What is it good for? Here, I'm well fed, comfortable, entertained, and safe. A combination of things I would never have if I stepped out. I've felt kinda strange lately, however. I can feel some kind of weirdness when I'm close to anything leading out, like windows or doors. It's hard to describe. You know that feeling when you know you're being watched so intently that it's as if your clothes didn't exist and your thoughts were written on your forehead? It's like that in a sense, but increasing the closer I am to even be looking out. At first, I attributed it to my anxiousness stepping out after not even seeing the sun for so long. Maybe my mental was just messed up. Problem is, I don't think I see even sunlight coming from the windows anymore. The tape, of course, doesn't help, but you would imagine at least some light coming from between it or piercing it, right? Then comes the thing that maybe sounds weird to you all. but that at the time made no difference for me. The topic of food. How do I get my groceries? That type of stuff. Well, I don't know. I remember vividly I ordered most of my food at the beginning, as well as me having the money to always afford it somehow. At some point, my orders stopped going through, but food keeps showing up inside the house. You would think this is a real red flag, right? Well, this didn't bother me too much. In fact, I was excited. Who wouldn't be happy to get free food? That thought process was so liberating, right until the feeling I mentioned started. The food started showing up less often, and when it does, even touching it feels dirty. The consistency is fine, but there's this prickling in the back of my head, as if I was going through radioactive waste. I started to notice how different I look when the pain from hunger started. I can feel my bare bones in every touch. My sunken cheeks are so sunken I probably look like a blinking corpse, as I barely have any energy to do anything else most of the time. It's been 3 days since the last time I received any food, and hunger slapped me out of the stupor. I've tried to look up, multiple times, if there's something going on in my city, or the world, but there are no related news, as if everything is normal outside. But how does this make any sense? I feel the dread from every opening in my house increasing every single day, and may even be hallucinating from hunger, as I can see shadows and curious figures from the corners of my eyes, every single time I turn my head. So I decided to remove the tape and finally look outside one of my windows. There is no window behind the tape. It's a wall. They're all walls behind the tape. I don't think there's any point in discussing this. I don't think I have the time to figure out any other solutions before hunger makes me unable to even act on any plan. I know the door is not a wall, as I've already felt its texture many times since this situation began. So I'll open the door today. I decided to write this in case hunger takes me, or if the outside takes that first. If I survive, I'll get back to you all. Farewell. This one feels like a terrifying short film. And it's really in all the subtle details that would be in a short film. The sealed windows, unexplained food, the feeling that somebody's watching, rather than like Scary Movie 2 jump scares. Anyways, here's the next story. The next story today is also from r/NoSleep from user Croton Todd. I broke into a public pool with my friend 20 years ago. Something was already waiting for us. I've been trying to write this for 3 years. Every time I get close, I stop, because putting it into words makes it real in a way I can still just barely pretend it isn't. But I saw something last week that tells me it's not over, so here it is. The fence was easy. It always was. Julian went over first, the 4 beer bottles in his backpack clanking as he landed on the grass below. I followed, and the moment my feet hit the ground on the other side, I felt it. A pressure change. Almost like the air inside the pool grounds was slightly different from the air outside, thicker and attentive. I didn't say anything. I was 17. You don't say things like that at 17. The pool lay in near total darkness, broken only by pale light filtering through the trees from the street lamps outside. Built in the 1950s, the place carried the heavy geometry of socialist architecture that was present everywhere in this part of Germany. Though the pool sat close to the center of town, the cliff surrounding it swallowed most of the city noise. By the time we crossed the lawn, only the wind in the trees and the faint hum of distant traffic remained. And one other sound. A soft, irregular dripping from somewhere near the diving basin. Rhythmic enough to notice, irregular enough to bother me. The pools had been drained for the winter. There was nothing to drip. I told myself it was a pipe. A leak somewhere in the filtration system. I kept walking. Ahead of us stretched the long rectangular swimming pool. Beside it, the shorter diving basin, separated by a narrow concrete walkway. And above it all, the diving platform, towering 10 meters over the water like a concrete monolith, silent and imposing. There was a figure standing at the top of it. I grabbed Julian's arm. He stopped. We both stood there and looked. The figure was perfectly still, standing at the very edge of the platform. Not too still, not the stillness of someone enjoying their view or steadying their nerves. The stillness of something that wasn't doing anything at all except standing there. "There's someone up there," I whispered. Julian squinted. "I don't see anything." I looked again. The platform was empty. I stood there for a long moment, my eyes moving across every shadow on that platform. Nothing. Just concrete and darkness. "You're freaking yourself out," Julian said, and headed for the ladder. I followed him. What else was I going to do? The metal steps rattled softly beneath our weight as we climbed. Halfway up, I made the mistake of looking down. The lawn, the benches, the pools, already too far away. And the dripping sound was louder up here, much louder, coming from directly below, from inside the empty diving basin. I didn't look down into the basin. At the top, Julian walked straight to the edge while I stayed back, one hand around the cold metal rail, eyes adjusting to the dark. The platform was empty. Of course it was. But there was something on the concrete near the railing. A wet footprint, just one, facing outward toward the edge. Too large to be a child's, too narrow to be a man's, and wet in a way that made no sense because there was no water within 10 meters of where we were standing. I put my hand over it without quite meaning to. Still warm. "Julian." "What?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. He handed me one of the beers, and I took it. I used my pocket knife to pry off the cap and flicked it over the railing without thinking. It struck the concrete below, and then half a second later, there was another sound. Quieter, more wet, and wrong. Like something shifting its weight on the floor of the empty basin. Julian hadn't noticed. He was sitting near the edge, one leg dangling over the dark. "Hey," he said, "have you ever heard the story?" I knew the story. Everyone at school knew it. Two boys, refugees from the Kosovo War, strong alcohol, a warm summer night, and a dare. One of them had backed up to the far end of the platform, taken a running start, and jumped the walkway into the main pool. Made it. His friend had tried to follow. Julian told it slowly, the way you tell a story you've told before and enjoy telling. When he got to the end, he raised his fist and opened his hand in front of his face, his mouth forming a wet, crushing sound. He came down right on the walkway. The wind moved through the trees below us. "People say," Julian murmured, staring down at the walkway, "if you get enough speed, it's actually possible." And that was when I saw it again. Not on the platform this time, down on the walkway below. The figure, standing exactly where Julian was looking. Same impossible stillness. Same position right at the edge of the concrete, facing the diving basin, facing up toward us. This time, Julian saw it too. I know he did because he stopped talking mid-sentence. His whole body went rigid in a way that had nothing to do with the beer or the height. We stared down at it, and it didn't move. It had no features I could make out from that distance, no clear outline. It was more like an absence of something, a shape defined by what it displaced rather than what it was. The shadows around it were strong. They fell toward it instead of away from it. And then it looked up. I can't tell you how I knew. There was no face to read, no eyes to meet. But the quality of its stillness changed in an instant, the way a sleeping animal changes when it becomes aware of you without yet moving a muscle. We felt it the way you feel someone standing behind you in a dark room. Julian was on his feet. I don't remember either of us deciding to leave. I remember the ladder, the rung slippery under my palms. Julian's feet clanging on the metal above me. I remember hitting the lawn and running without looking back. The fence, the wire biting into my hands, the street on the other side, the ordinary amber glow of the lamps. We ran for 5 minutes before we stopped. I looked at Julian. He was white to the lips. "What was that?" I said, not a question. He shook his head. "We never went back. We never talked about it. Not once in the years that followed until we lost touch finally. Whatever agreement we'd reached that night was wordless and absolute. Years passed. We moved to different cities, built different lives, and eventually stopped calling each other altogether. But I never fully lost that night. The warm wind, the black water, the thing on the walkway with its shadows falling the wrong way. It stayed lodged somewhere I couldn't reach, like a splinter buried too deep to find. I tried, eventually, to find out whether the story about the two boys had been real. I searched for hours and found nothing. No newspaper report, no record. Maybe it was invented. Maybe every town needs its own urban legend. Then I found Julian's obituary. Brief, careful language. The kind of language people use when the circumstances are what everyone suspects, but no one will say directly. I sat with that for a long time. Last week, I walked past the pool. My parents still live nearby, so I pass it sometimes. It was renovated a few years ago, the concrete walkway demolished, the two basins merged into one long, unbroken stretch of water. The specific geometry of that night, the gap, the distance that had defined everything, was gone. I don't know why I stopped. I stood at the fence for a while in the dawn, looking at the platform, and I did what I always do, what I've been doing for 20 years on balconies and bridges and the tops of parking structures. I calculated the distance, the arc, the speed. My mind does it automatically now. I've stopped trying to make it stop. The pool was empty. The lawn was empty. The platform stood against the darkening sky the way it always had, concrete and patient and still. I told myself there was nothing there, and I almost believed it. And then my stomach dropped, the same way it had 20 years ago, before I understood what I was looking at. Not a movement, not a sound, just a shift in the character of the dark at the top of the platform, an attention turning, something up there becoming aware that I was standing at the fence below. I left. I ran. I haven't slept properly since. I think about Julian on that platform 20 years ago, his foot sliding backward. Whether he had heard those words from someone too, in the dark, at the top of some platform he shouldn't have been on. Whether that's how it works. Whether it's always worked that way. Whether it's been working that way on me, slowly ever since. Because I still calculate the distance, every time, automatically, without wanting to. And lately, the number it keeps arriving at is the same one. And lately, that number has started to feel like an answer. If anyone recognizes that pool, I don't know if staying away helps. I stayed away for 20 years and it didn't stop. But don't climb the ladder. Whatever you feel when you're standing at the base of it, whatever feels like curiosity or courage or just wanting to know, don't climb the ladder. It's been up there a long time. It knows how to wait. You know, creepy pool at night with strange figure just feels like it belongs in a horror movie. This entity or whatever it is in this story doesn't just like kill its victims. It lets them destroy themselves over time. And I don't know, I think it's movie worthy. The next story today is from r/nosleep from user tticeboy123. I've counted my crew before every dredge for 14 years. Tonight, the count was wrong. I'm the senior deckhand on a 68-foot trawler called the Margaret Ann. I've worked this boat for 14 years. The crew is 6, Captain Hal, First Mate Donnie, Engineer Pete, and 3 deckhands. Me, Manny, and Ruben. 6. Hold on to that number while I tell you the rest of this. I do the head count before every dredge. That's my job as senior deckhand. Before we lower the trawl, before we haul it back, before we open the coat end, I count. 6 men, accounted for, all in the right positions. It's a safety thing. The coat end can swing when it comes up full, and if we're missing a man we don't know about, he could be in the water. I've done this head count on this boat for 14 years. The number has always been 6. I want you to remember that I am the one who knows. 3 days into the trip, we set the trawl over a section of bottom Hal had marked on the chart. 800 feet. The kind of depth where the haul takes nearly an hour and the cable hums under the load. We started bringing it up around 2 a.m. Hal called down asking what we had, and Donnie said the sonar was reading a mass that wasn't a fish. Just a single dense object in the coat end, big as a small car. Manny said it was probably a container, lost cargo from a freighter. We've pulled up tires, refrigerators, an entire fiberglass dinghy once. Whatever it was, we couldn't dump it back. The net was tangled around it and the cable was straining. We winched it onto the deck. The coat end hit the planks with a sound I had heard before. 11 years ago, I worked recovery on a ferry that capsized in fog. We pulled 14 people out of the water that week. They all sounded like that when we set them down on the deck. Not a thud, a wet weight. The way a body sounds when it has been in cold water long enough to take some of the cold with it. I hadn't heard that sound in 11 years, and I was hearing it now. We did not open the net. Hal came down from the bridge. He looked at the coat end for a long time. He told us to lash it down where it sat, leave it under the tarp, and not open it until daylight. He said he wanted Pete to look at it first. I did the head count. 6. Hal back on the bridge, Donnie on the bridge with Hal, Pete coming up from the engine room, Manny lashing the tarp, Reuben holding the spotlight, me at the rail. We went to bed. In the morning, we opened the net, and there was nothing inside. The coat end was empty. Not the catch fell out empty, empty. The cinch line was tied, the mesh had a gap. It was a small gap, right at the seam where the cinch meets the body of the net. The cordage was unraveled, not torn. It had come apart, like fingers had worked at the knots from the inside until the seam gave. I stood looking at the gap for a long time before Hal called me over to help with the deck. I did the head count. 6. We started cleaning up. I was coiling the lazy line when I saw it. There was a handprint on the deck where the coat end had been resting. 5 fingers, palm flat, the heel of the hand pressed into the planks, the size of a man's hand, already drying in the morning sun. The wood around the fingers was wrong. The grain was raised, slightly splintered, lifted away from the surface. Not pressed down, pulled. The handprint hadn't been left by something resting its weight on the dock. It had been left by something dragging itself across the deck, fingers digging in for purchase, the wood resisting and giving way in small fibers. I scrubbed the print with a deck brush before anyone else came back to the side of the boat. I don't know why I did that. We kept fishing. The next day, the catch was thin. We dragged the same bottom and pulled up almost nothing. Hal said we had spooked the fish, so he moved us 30 miles east. That night, around 1 a.m., I came up from the bunk to use the head, and Reuben was sitting at the galley table. Reuben does not work the late watch. He should have been asleep. He works the morning watch with me, and we both come up at 4 a.m. He was sitting at the galley with his back to me. He wasn't eating anything. He wasn't on his phone. The galley was dark, except for the small light over the stove. I said his name. He turned around. It was Reuben. His face, his shape, but he was looking at me like he didn't know who I was, and his eyes weren't focusing on mine. They were focusing somewhere about 6 inches behind my head. I said, "What are you doing up?" His mouth moved. The shape of his mouth made the words, "I'm hungry." The sound came a half second later. The voice was Reuben's voice, but it arrived after his lips had already finished the sentence and gone still, as if the words had to travel from somewhere else to reach me. There was nothing in front of him, no food, no plate, no cup. I stood there for a few seconds. He turned back around and faced the dark wall again. I went to the head. When I came back through the galley, he was gone. The chair he had been sitting in was pulled out from the table, not pushed back in. I put my hand on the seat. The wood was warm, body warm. I went down to the bunk room. He was in his bunk, asleep, snoring the way he always snores. I checked. I shook his shoulder. He woke up enough to swear at me and then went back to sleep. I stood in the bunk room and counted. Hal in the captain's cabin, Donnie in his bunk, Pete in his bunk, Manny in his bunk, Reuben in his bunk, me standing. 6. I went back up through the galley. The chair was still pulled out. I put my hand on it again. Still warm. I went to bed. I came up at 4 a.m. for my watch. I walked through the galley on the way to the deck. The chair was still pulled out, and I put my hand on it. Still warm. Same temperature it had been at 1 a.m. Body warm. The chair had been warm for 3 hours, and the wood was old, and the galley was cold, and nothing should have stayed warm that long. Whatever had been sitting in that chair was warming it from the inside. I worked my watch. I came through the galley around 6 a.m., and the chair was still pulled out. The wood was cool now. Whatever had been sitting there was finished. The next day, Reuben didn't remember being in the galley. I asked him, and he said he slept through the night. I asked Manny if he heard me come up. Manny said he had not heard anything. I started counting more often. Every time I came up on deck, every time I went down to the bunk room, every time I passed someone in the corridor, the count stayed at 6. The count was always 6. I'm writing that down because I want it on the record that the count was 6 right up until it wasn't. Day 6 of the trip. Hal had called everyone to the wheelhouse for a quick meeting about the route home. We stood in a half circle around the chart table. I counted heads. 6. Hal talked for about 3 minutes. He told us the bottom east of here had been dead, and we were going to pack it in early and run back to port a day ahead of schedule. Then he told us to get back to work. We started filing out of the wheelhouse. The rest of the day I worked the deck. We were stowing gear, breaking down the trawl, washing salt off the winches. I counted 3 times that afternoon. Each time, I came up with the same number. 5. I didn't register that the number had changed. I want to be precise about this. I counted 5, and I wrote 5 in my head. And I didn't feel the count was wrong. I just kept working. It was sometime around dinner that I realized I'd been counting 5 for hours, and that an hour ago I'd been counting 6, and that no one had left the boat. We were 150 miles from shore. No one could have left. I went to Hal and asked him who else was on the boat. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "What do you mean? How many of us are there?" He said, 5. Always been 5. You feeling okay? I went back to my station. I didn't finish the evening's work. I sat with my back against the rail and tried to remember the name of the 6th man. The name would not come. I've worked with him for 14 years. I should know his name the way I know my own. But when I tried to think of him, I could only think of his place at the rail, his hands on the cinch line, the way he laughed at one of Hal's jokes once, on a calm day 4 trips ago. I could see the place where he should be, but I couldn't see him. I went down to the bunk room. There were 5 bunks. I had never noticed there were only 5 bunks. I could have sworn there were 6. The space where the 6th bunk should have been was wall. The wall was old. The wood matched the rest of the bunk room. There was no seam, no hinge, no evidence anything had ever been there. I'm writing this from my bunk. I've been here for about an hour. The crew is treating me normally. They keep asking if I'm feeling okay. They think I'm having a breakdown. I just got up and looked at myself in the small mirror over the sink in the head. It's my face. Every detail is right. The scar above my left eyebrow from the winch cable in 2019. The way my hair grows in 2 directions at the crown. The chip in my front tooth from a fight in 2014. I stood and watched the face for a long time, looking for what was wrong. The face was breathing slightly behind me. When I inhaled, the reflection inhaled a quarter second after. When I exhaled, the reflection exhaled a quarter second after. The chest rose late. The chest fell late. I held my breath. The reflection held its breath. I tried to catch it not breathing when I wasn't breathing. I couldn't. But the timing was wrong. I came back to my bunk. I sat down. I was looking at my hands. They were my hands. The scar across the right knuckle from the winch accident in 2019 was there. The ring of paler skin on the left finger from where I'd worn a wedding ring for the 4 years before the divorce. The small permanent stain of net tar on the right thumb that no soap has ever fully cleaned off. The hands looked right. I pinched the back of my left hand with my right hand. Pinched hard. the way you would want to wake yourself up from a dream. I felt the pressure, but no pain. I pinched harder. I twisted the skin between my fingernails. I watched the skin redden and crease. Nothing. I bit the side of my hand. I bit hard enough that I should have broken the skin. The skin did not break. My teeth pressed into something that gave like meat, but did not bleed and did not hurt. The hands look right. But whatever they are made of is starting to forget what hands are made of. I took out my phone. I have a photo from before we left port. The crew standing in front of the boat at the dock. I keep it as my phone background. I opened the photo, and there were 5 men in it. Hal, Donnie, Pete, Manny, and Ruben. I counted them 3 times. 5. I've been looking at this photo for 8 days. I know this photo. I was at the dock that morning. I remember Hal making a joke about the weather. I remember Manny's mother dropping him off. I remember standing on the left side of the group, between the cooler and the bollard, with my hand on Ruben's shoulder. I'm not in the photo. The cooler is there, the bollard is there, Ruben's shoulder is there, and there's no hand on it. I've been at the dock. I've been on this boat. I've been at this rail and this wheel and these winches for 14 years. I'm being unmade. The thing we pulled up from 800 feet did not come onto the boat to live here. It came onto the boat to take my place. It worked the knots in the coat end from the inside until the seam gave. It dragged itself across the deck on its hands. It sat in my chair in the galley and warmed the wood from the inside. It wore Ruben's face for a few seconds at 1 a.m. to see how my face was worn. It's wearing my place now. Hal doesn't see me anymore. Hal sees 5 men, and one of them is in my spot, doing my job, with my hands on the lazy line. Hal is concerned about the man who keeps asking strange questions, but Hal does not know that man's name, and tomorrow, Hal won't see him at all. I've been trying to remember my own name. I had a name an hour ago. I was using it in my head, like a word you wear. I just tried to write it down, and the letters would not come. I tried to write the name of my mother. I tried to write the name of the town where I grew up. I tried to write the name of my first dog. The shapes are slipping. Hal, Donnie, Pete, Manny, Ruben. I know those names. I've known those names for 14 years. One of those names was my friend. One of those names called my name across the deck on the morning the photo was taken. I don't know which. The trip ends in 2 days. There'll be 5 men walking off boat in port. They won't be missing anyone because by then there will be no one to miss. If you are reading this and you remember me, please tell me my name. This one reminds me of I can't remember the name of it or even if it actually exists, but like an 80s psychological horror movie or something that I saw a long time ago. But yeah, no, the main character of this forgets who he is. Like the horror of this is that they don't even know if they ever existed at all. Sorry, I know I just sounded like a crazy person when I said that after listening to that back, but you get the idea. You get what I'm trying to say, person listening to this 40 minutes into this video. You hear me. You understand me. Nightmare. Anyways, let's go ahead and get on with the next story. I'm so sorry. It's from r/no sleep from user Right Chris Wright. My sleep paralysis demon is actually a pretty chill guy. My first memory of sleep paralysis happened when I was 10 years old. I remember because it was the night my parents took me to see Shrek 2 for getting good marks on my report card. It was an evening show, so we got in late and my mom tucked me straight into bed when we got home. It was around 4 a.m. when I woke up. The light from my alarm clock told me that much. I couldn't feel anything, not my pajamas against my skin or the warmth of my head against the pillow. I could feel my arms and legs, but they felt heavy, as if a great weight was holding them down. I tried to call out, but I couldn't. My voice caught in my throat, my lips unable to move. I mustered a weak groan that sounded like a cross between a frog's croak and a zombie's moan, but that was it. I thought I was dead. That this is what death feels like, being awake but unable to move or tell anyone. My mind wrestled with the idea of being placed in a coffin, unable to tell anyone I was still alive in here, unable to move or say anything as the lid closed and they put me in the ground, still alive. My fear subsided as I felt my heart thudding in my chest in response to my near panic attack. I also became aware of my breathing, which slowed as the fear subsided. I calmed a little, thinking it was just a dream. That was when I saw him for the first time. Mr. Brown Stick Legs. What kind of name is that for a sleep paralysis demon? He huddled in the corner of my room by my closet. His two oversized red eyes glowed in the dark of my bedroom. His face was like a porcelain mask, white, expressionless, with no mouth or nose, only those two haunting red eyes. When he stood up, his body unfolded like origami until his head reached the ceiling. His neck bent, tilting forward as his true height was greater than the height of my room. His long black torso was covered in shimmering symbols that reflected red into the light of his glowing eyes. He stood on two spindly thin legs and disappeared into the shadows of the room. He made no noise as he moved, seeming to glide as he hovered closer to my bed. His long, thin arms reached down to me as I moaned through paralyzed lips. I couldn't scream, even though I very much wanted to. His fingers reaching through the darkness, down to my face. Two pointed fingers touched against my eyelids, pushing them closed. I remember his fingertips feeling cool, but not cold. Even though the ends of his fingertips looked sharp, his touch was gentle. "Do not struggle, little one. Sleep," he said. His voice was so deep I could feel it in my chest when he spoke. I did as instructed, convincing myself that it was indeed a dream. Even if it wasn't, the back of my eyelids were more reassuring than looking into those piercing red eyes and his vacant mask of a face. I closed my eyes, wanting it to be a dream, willing it to be a dream. I woke up the next morning, thankfully able to move, walk, and talk. I explained what I saw to my parents, who both agreed that it was a dream. My mom tried floating the idea that something from Shrek 2 scared me, but neither my dad or I bought it. For confirmation, Dad asked that I draw a picture of what I saw for them. As I was drawing, I ran out of black crayon and had to finish his legs with the next darkest color in my crayon box. "Hey there, Mr. Brownstick Legs," my dad said as I handed him the drawing. "You leave my daughter alone now, you hear?" This is how my sleep paralysis demon ended up with the name Mr. Brownstick Legs. Giving him a silly name helped take some of the edge off of going to bed the following night. My dad even did a sweep of the room, calling out for him. "Here, Mr. Brownstick Legs," he said, whistling as if he were calling a dog. It made me giggle, and the whole episode felt more fun than scary. That's a good dad. Like that, a good dad would do something like that. But once they tucked me in and turned off the light, I felt the dread creeping back in. Darkness hits harder when you expect to find something lurking in the shadows. I don't know how long I searched, but eventually fell asleep. In the weeks following, I searched for Mr. Brownstick Legs every night as I fell asleep. Even when I went to sleepovers, I would do a cursory check just to make sure he didn't tag along to a friend's house. As time passed, my searches became less frequent. It was a couple months later, the night before my first day of 5th grade, when I woke up to Mr. Brownstick Legs straddled over my bed, his empty plate of a face inches from my own. A scream stuck in my throat, coming out sounding like a gush of air releasing from a pool float. "Hush, child," he said. His voice was deep and echoless. I didn't know how he spoke without a mouth, but I heard him nonetheless. I saw that he held a piece of paper in his thin fingers, crumpled on the edges and torn. He held it up to show me. On the page was a pink blob with blue dots for eyes and a drawl red smile and stick lines for legs and arms. It was lying on a blue rectangle. "I found the picture you drew of me, so I drew a picture of you," he said. "Do you like it?" He does seem like a pretty chill guy. I tried nodding, but I couldn't move. I tried answering, but all that came out was the same dry croaking sound. "Will you draw another one for me? I so liked the first one. You gave me pants. I look good in pants." Again, I was unable to respond or move to give him an answer. He must have been able to read my intent because he tucked the picture under my pillow before closing my eyes again. When I woke up in the morning, I bolted upright and tossed my pillow off the bed. My heart leapt into my throat when I found the picture. It wasn't a dream. He was real. I went to my desk and began drawing a picture for him, starting with his face and eyes. trying to capture as much detail as I could remember. I had forgotten all about the first day of school until my mom opened my door and found me still in my pajamas. "Lexi," she yelled, startling me as I was coloring in his eyes. "Your bus will be here in less than an hour. Get dressed now." I tucked my picture into my school backpack and got dressed. I finished my drawing at recess that day, using my brand new Crayola 64 pack that I got with my back-to-school supplies. I gave him blue pants this time, figuring he'd like to see himself in jeans. I wrote his name, Mr. Brownstick Legs, at the bottom of the picture and drew a smiley face next to it, hoping he'd like his nickname. I flipped the paper over to write him a message on the back. I wanted to ask him questions, but didn't want to anger him since he visited me when I was at my most vulnerable. I wrote out my letter on a separate piece of paper before copying it over to the back of my picture. "Dear Mr. Brownstick Legs," that's your name. "My name is Lexi. I'm in the 5th grade. What's your name? How old are you? Do you go to school? Why do you visit my bedroom? Why can't I move when you visit? You look scary, but you also seem nice. I hope we can be friends. Love, Lexi. P.S. I hope you like your blue pants." I added another smiley face at the end of the letter, my final emphasis on wanting to be friends. I considered closing with "sincerely," but I figured love was a better, friendlier choice. I tucked the picture under my pillow that night, now anxious to see him rather than filled with dread of his reappearance. But like the last time, he didn't return the next day, or the day after. The days stretched into weeks, and every morning I found the picture tucked under my pillow from the night before. It wasn't until Thanksgiving break that I saw him again. My eyes opened as the morning sun poked through the blinds of my bedroom. His body didn't look any different in the light. In fact, his black skin seemed darker, absorbing the sun's rays without giving anything back. His eyes seemed wider than before. If he had a mouth, I would have figured he was smiling. In his slender fingers was the picture I drew for him. "Hello, Lexi," he said. "Thank you for the picture. I do look good in blue pants." I wanted to smile, but, well, sleep paralysis. He flipped the picture over to the side with my letter. "I will answer your questions the best I can. I do not have a name. Not one you could ever pronounce, but I'm happy for you to call me Mr. Brownstick Legs. As for my age, I exist outside of the construct of time. Therefore, I am ageless. I do not go to school, nor do I know what school is. Why do I visit you? I visit to feed on the energy of your soul." All right, friendly guy, but eating your soul. It is what it is. Just chalk it up as a loss. But no, I mean, at the same time, if he's a chill guy, why not let him have a little nibble of your soul every once in a while? My breath quickened as a mute groan excited my teeth. I wanted to run, wanted to get away from him, but I was pinned down, unable to move. He sensed my uneasiness and tried to calm me by patting my forehead. "Let me explain. Have you been to the ocean? It appears vast, almost limitless as you stare out into the blue water, with no visible land on the other side." In my mind, I was standing on a beach. I felt the salty ocean breeze against my face as I looked out over the massive body of water. The waves crashed at my feet. I felt the rush of water over them, followed by the trickle of sand and pebbles as the water drew back. "Your soul is like an ocean, child. Vast, limitless, undefinable by words to your understanding. I take only a tiny sip, a single glass of water from a vast ocean. I'm not one who could consume an entire ocean." Dark clouds formed over the water as I stared at the white-capped waves. The clouds unleashed a heavy downpour, turning the horizon gray as rain fell from the sky over the ocean. Just as the rain falls over the ocean, your soul can replenish itself by more than I could ever consume. Not even in 1,000 of your years. Does that make you feel better? On the beach in my mind's vision, I nodded. In my bedroom, he nodded back at me. "Good. As for your last question, why can you not move? We are meeting at a point outside of your time, where your world and mine touch. Your physical body cannot move here, but if you persist, you can learn to speak to me with your mind, and I will answer your questions in exchange for your drawings. You can draw pictures of whatever you like. I want to know more of your world." In my mind, I nodded again. "This knowledge is a gift, so we can understand one another. I am not one who would hurt you." He pressed his fingertips to my eyelids again, closing them. In my mind's eye, I was still on the beach, but the sun was setting, and no stars were visible through the rain. I drifted back to sleep to the sound of falling rain. The next morning, I asked my parents for a sketchbook and colored pencils. They tried to hold me off until Christmas, but since I spent most of my afternoons and weekends drawing pictures up in my room, Dad let me open one of my gifts a week early. A Strathmore sketchbook with 100 pages with a 50-pack of Crayola colored pencils. I started by drawing the rest of my family. Mom, Dad, my little brother Tommy, our cat Libby, and even though he had died, our dog Pancakes. What a great name for a dog. Pancakes. Next, I drew our house, then our car, then my school. I kept drawing anything I could think of. Trees, birds, insects, until my sketchbook was full. I used my allowance to purchase more books so I could keep drawing. I honed my craft, redoing my earlier drawings in greater detail. My thoughts considered his wording. I am not one who could consume an entire ocean. I wanted to ask him if there were those who could, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to know such things. Mr. Brownstick Legs didn't return until my freshman year of high school. To him, it wasn't like any time had passed. I read up on lucid dreaming in the time between visits so that when he returned, I would be better capable of talking to him. He held my book in his hands, flipping through my drawings, doting over the increased refinement of my drawing skills. I had filled a dozen sketch pads and upgraded from Crayola to Prismacolor Premier pencils for my drawings. His biggest surprise was when after he complimented my drawings, I spoke to him. "Thank you," I said, seeing the words in my mind as I spoke them aloud. If he had a surprised expression, his eyes showed it. "You have been very busy, child," he said. "Do you have any questions you would like to ask?" I hesitated, but finally formed the words in my mind. "Are there creatures who can consume an entire ocean?" He didn't respond right away, which made me think I had not asked properly. As I asked him a second time, he put a finger to my lips as if to shush me. "There are those who can. They are known as the Dark Ones. They are capable of consuming entire souls, emptying them out, leaving them dry and barren. You should not fear them, but you should also not provoke them." His eyes curved downward, as if concerned or afraid. "What do they look like?" I asked. In my mind, my visions were filled with images of great, terrible creatures. Spiders taller than the Empire State Building on thin, spindly legs of shadow and smoke. Tentacled monsters in the seas lifting blue whales like they were toys, ripping them to shreds with their curved chitinous beaks. Great, ghastly flying creatures that knocked over orchards and forests with the beat of their leathery wings. "I showed you only because you ask," Mr. Brownstick Legs said. "But it is best that we don't talk or think about them. Let them be." I nodded in my mind. He leaned forward and pressed his plate-like face to my head as if to kiss me on the forehead, which was odd since he didn't have a mouth. Then, as usual, he closed my eyes and I drifted back to sleep. My life took a downturn during the latter years of high school. My dad lost his job, and when the search for a new one dragged on, he turned to drinking to cope with his failure. He wasn't abusive, but he wasn't fun to be around either. In the following months, my parents would hush their arguing when I entered the room, greeting me with smiles as if nothing were wrong. That lasted until the day I came home from school to them fighting over a foreclosure notice from the bank. We moved out over a weekend from our home in the suburbs to an apartment on the other side of town. I internalized my feelings during that time. I withdrew from my friends and school activities besides the art club, the only one we could still afford. I saw my friends driving to school and hanging out while I rode the bus, too poor and too far out the way to join in. My tastes began to change as well. Out was the bubblegum pop of Katy Perry, Kesha, and Taylor Swift. Instead, I listened to Pierce the Veil, Sleeping with Sirens, and Bring Me the Horizon. My clothes and makeup became darker, more black t-shirts and skirts with black eyeliner and black fingernail polish. My mom called it my goth phase, not that she understood. My drawings became darker too. I moved from colored pencils to charcoal, drawing skulls and gothic-looking cemeteries as my passion for drawing animals and flowers waned. I also drew the dark ones, in great detail, exactly how I remembered them in my mind's eye. Yeah, that sounds like a mistake. Mr. Brownstick Legs visited me again a month after we moved into the apartment. He looked more at home and in my room of blacklight posters and death metal bands than he did in my previous room. His eyes were dim, not the vibrant red as they were before. He stared at me as I lay in bed, unable to move. He moved inches from my face as I heard his words in my mind. Your soul tastes different now. He didn't speak of my drawings. I worried that he might, especially since I had been drawing the dark ones, not only drawing them, but thinking about them, and what type of damage they could do if they were to wake. He seemed sad for me, although reading his expression was difficult with no face. He patted my forehead like before, but didn't close my eyes before leaving as he used to. My life continued its spiraling path like a bottle rocket with a broken stick. My parents didn't talk outside of short conversations about which bills to pay and which ones to ignore. Each night, Dad disappeared into a bottle while Mom disappeared to an online chat with a male Facebook friend she knew from high school. The thing about rock bottom is that it's often a disguise for a trapdoor that drops you to an even lower depth than you thought possible. The first bottom came when my father died. Drove off the road into a gravel pit late at night with an empty bottle of bourbon in the passenger seat. I cried, but it felt hollow. I felt hollow. Even when Mom tried to hold me, I felt nothing inside. Not sadness, not guilt, not anything. I disappeared into my sketchbooks, drawing even darker, more disturbing images. Death, dismemberment, vividly accurate vivisections of the cute animals I used to enjoy drawing. My friends no longer talked to me, which was fine because I didn't want to talk to them anymore anyways. I found people to hang out with. Not friends, but people who could get me access to moments of chemical-induced euphoria to forget about life for a while. Just like that, the trapdoor opened, dropping me to a new rock bottom of addiction. One thing that I had in common with my dad, but instead of falling into a bottle, I fell into a needle. I stole money from my mom's purse to feed my habits. Not that she noticed. She was busy with her old Facebook friend who had moved from online acquaintance to nightly sleepover companion. When the time came to begin my senior year, I didn't bother going back. I kept drawing, filling entire sketchbooks with the dark images that reflected my bleak outlook on life. The dark ones were prevalent subjects during this period in my life. I drew them feasting on humanity, raking flesh from bone and their jagged teeth behind lips of smoke. I came home one night to find my mom and her new male friend in the middle of a fight. It was different from her fights with Dad. More violent, more physical. When he raised his hand at me for trying to intervene, I decided it was time to bolt. I left home, hitching rides with anyone with a set of wheels I could manage to put up with for short periods of time. My preference leaned toward those with access to the chemical release I craved. The more I could numb, the more I could escape. I found certain drug combinations had similar effects to sleep paralysis, where my mind's ability to control my body's action became severed. In those moments of numb paralysis, I'd see Mr. Brownstick Legs watching from afar as I dulled the pain. I saw what I perceived as the dark ones too, but they weren't hiding in the shadows like Mr. Brownstick Legs did. They were the shadows. I called out to them as well, for in those moments I wanted nothing more than to be hollowed out and empty, a void so dark no pain could ever penetrate it. When they didn't answer, I called out to Mr. Brownstick Legs, but he would vanish every time. Perhaps it was just a drug-fueled hallucination. Overdosing was never my intention. I was pushing too much, trying to find the edge of the void after feeling so low, so very low, searching for that something extra to filter out the background noise. I took it too far, giving myself a near-lethal dose. At one moment, I was lying next to strangers on a stained mattress in an abandoned warehouse. Then came the initial rush of euphoric bliss, and then nothing. Whoever I was traveling with at the time dumped me off the curb in front of the ER, making me someone else's problem. This was my rock bottom moment, although at the time it felt more like a free fall. I spent 3 weeks in a coma. I was aware of my surroundings and could hear the doctors and nurses as they checked my vitals and tended to my cleanliness and upkeep, but I couldn't move or speak. At the end of my 3rd week in the ICU, intubated, I looked up to find Mr. Brownstick Legs hovering over me, his round red eyes peering through the darkness. "What have you done to yourself, child?" His voice spoke inside my mind. In my mind, I was beside him, standing in the middle of a vast salt-flat desert. The ground was cracked and dry in a hexagonal pattern that stretched in all directions. "This is your soul now. There's nothing left to drink." I heard my beep of my heart rate monitor back in my hospital room speed up as fear entered my mind. "I called out to the Dark Ones," I said. "I asked for them to come. They emptied me out, emptied my soul." "No, my child, you did this. You have not replenished, you have only consumed. And now nothing remains." I dropped to my knees in the middle of the salt as I felt a rumbling deep inside the hollow pit of my stomach. I leaned forward onto my arms, but they were no longer my arms. They were pitch black and empty. I could feel them, but when I looked at them, they were empty voids of smoke and shadow. I stood up on my legs, but they were no longer my legs. The darkness swirled up my torso and down my arms. The emptiness inside me consumed my entire body until only my head remained. What's happening to me? I heard a snap as my arms and legs split, forming 8 black, spindly, thin legs. I collapsed onto them, unable to support myself. Mr. Brownstick Legs glided down in front of my face, his eyes inches from my own. "As I told you, child, only the Dark Ones have the ability to consume an entire ocean of a soul. That is your fate. That is what you will become." Back in the room, my heart rate monitor crashed to a flat line. I felt the cold darkness swirl up my neck to my head as the void consumed me. I was aware of the nurses and doctors huddled around my body, prepping the crash cart, but all I felt was the cold consuming what was left of me. "Help me," I uttered, "please." My physical body jolted from the electric paddles, but I felt nothing, only the cold darkness. A needle injected into my IV as they recharged for another burst of electricity. Still, I felt nothing. Only cold, only darkness, only the vast emptiness of the void. Mr. Brownstick Legs tilted his head as he stared through his unblinking red eyes. He leaned forward, pressing his plate-like face to my forehead. I felt a vibration against my skin, followed by the tingling sensation of heat returning. The darkness receded back down my arms and legs. As he pulled back, his red eyes had diminished. A gift for the girl who gave me pants. A tear formed in my eye. It rolled down my cheek and fell onto the parched landscape below. Before I could say anything, an electronic jolt coursed through my body, pulling me away from the salt-flat expanse and back to my hospital room. The sinus rhythm of my heart monitor returned to normal. I felt the cool gel of the defibrillator paddles against my chest. I remembered squeezing the hand of one of the attending nurses, who looked down at me, smiling. "Look who's awake." I cried, but it was different than before. I felt the pain I had long been avoiding, but I felt something else as well. I felt grateful, and I felt a sense of hope I hadn't known in a long time. It was a long road back from the darkness, but the thing about the road to recovery is that, like a road, it leads to a destination. After years of listless drifting towards the void, having a destination was an important first step in finding self-love. I reconnected with my mother, who was struggling with her own form of the darkness. We leaned on one another, talking and going to therapy as we worked through the issues that drove us apart. After my release from the hospital, I moved back home with her. Her Facebook friend long gone. I got my GED and used my mini sketchbooks as a portfolio to get an apprenticeship at a tattoo parlor. I've been clean for 4 years now, and it feels good to smile again. Granted, I still prefer Pierce the Veil to anything from Katy Perry's catalog, and my tattoos and jewelry have more skulls than fluffy bunnies, but that's all on the surface. I no longer crave the darkness to consume me. I often think about the vision from Mr. Brownstick Legs on the salt flats that night in the hospital. I had not seen him since that night, and I often wondered about the state of my soul since that day. Has it replenished, or is it still the dried-up barren wasteland that he took me to on that night? Last night around 3 a.m, I finally got my answer. I woke up with a heaviness on my chest, arms and legs. At first, I felt the grips of fear grabbing hold, much like the first time I experienced it. But then, in the dark corner of my room, I saw glowing red eyes staring back at me from the shadows. In spite of my sleep paralysis, I couldn't help but smile when I heard his voice call out to me. "Child, Your soul tastes much better now. A scary movie with a good ending. This is actually like one of my favorite stories I've ever read for YouTube, and I just really wanted to include it. But yeah, this would be a wild movie, right? Like, I swear, if half of these Reddit stories that I read were actually horror movies or whatever, they would make a killing, like hundreds of millions opening night. Like, I don't know if that's a thing, but yeah. The next one today is from r/no sleep from user Sarcasonomicon. If you're armed and at the Glenmont Metro, please shoot me. Make it a headshot. Shoot me in the temple, aiming slightly downwards. I need the bullet to travel the shortest possible distance through my brain before it hits my hippocampus. If I'm lucky, the sensation of the gunshot ripping through my skull will only last a few decades. As awful as this sounds, you'll be doing me an enormous favor. Death by a headshot, as soon as possible, is vastly better than the alternative. My ordeal started over 10,000 years ago, at 10:15 this morning. Okay, what? I earn extra money by participating in drug trials. I'm a so-called healthy subject who takes experimental drugs to help assess side effects. Once it was a kidney drug. A few times it's been something for blood pressure or cholesterol. This morning they told me the drug I took was a psychoactive substance intended to accelerate brain function. None of the drugs I had tested so far have ever done anything for me, in the recreational sense. In other words, none of the drugs I've tested have given me a killer buzz, or mellowed me out, or anything. Maybe I've always ended up on the placebo group, but nothing I've tested had affected me at all. Today's drug was different. This stuff worked. They gave me a pill at 10:15 and told me to hang out in the waiting room until they called me back for some tests. Only about 30 minutes. The research assistant told me. I flopped onto the waiting room couch and read a few articles from a copy of Psychology Today that was sitting on the coffee table. They hadn't called me back when I finished the Psychology Today, so I picked up a US News and read it cover to cover. Then I read an old Scientific American. What was taking them so long? I sluggishly turned my head to look at the wall clock. It was only 10:23 a.m. I had read all 3 magazines in 8 minutes. I remember thinking this was going to be a long day. I was right. The waiting room had a little bookshelf with some used hardcovers on it. When I stood up to walk to the bookshelf, it felt like my legs barely worked. It's not just that they were weak, they were just slow. It took me a full minute just to stand up off the couch and another minute to take 2 steps to the bookcase. I scanned the old books on the shelf and picked out a copy of Moby Dick. My arms had the same problems as my legs. Just reaching 1 foot in front of me to grab the book took a long time. I actually got bored just waiting for my hand to reach the spine of the book. I slogged back to the couch and collapsed onto it in a slow-motion fall that reminded me of the low-gravity hops of astronauts on the moon. I opened up Moby Dick slowly and began reading. I started with Call Me Ishmael and got as far as Ahab throwing his pipe into the sea, which was all the way to the frickin' chapter 30, before they called me back. How are you feeling? The research assistant asked me. I feel slow, I said. Actually, it's the other way around. Everything seems slow because you're so fast. But my legs, my arms, they're moving in slow motion. Your body seems like it's moving slowly because your brain is fast. Your brain is running 10 or 20 times faster than normal. You're thinking and perceiving reality at an accelerated pace, but your body is still constrained by the laws of biomechanics. Frankly, you're moving much faster than a normal person. She pantomimed a jogging motion. But your brain is running so much faster right now that even your fast walk seems very slow to you. I thought about my slow motion flop onto the waiting room couch. Even if my muscles had slowed down, my body still would react to gravity the same way. But in the waiting room, I even fell in slow motion. Slow muscles couldn't explain why gravity seemed weaker. My brain was going at warp 10. That's how I managed to read 3 magazines and the first 30 chapters of Moby Dick in 15 minutes. They ran a series of tests on me. The physical tests were fun. They made me juggle 3 balls, then 4, then 6. I had no problem keeping 6 balls in the air because they seemed to be moving so slowly. It was boring, frankly, waiting for each ball to move through its arc so I could catch it with my slow motion hands and toss it back into the air. They threw Cheerios up in the air, and I caught them with chopsticks. They dropped a handful of coins, and I counted the total value before they hit the ground. The cognitive tests were less fun, but very illuminating. Finish a 50-word word search, 3 seconds. Solve an intricate maze drawn onto a poster-sized paper, 2 seconds. View a slideshow projected at 10 images per second and answer detailed questions about what I saw, 95% correct. They told me I measured over 250 on the Knopf scale. Apparently, that's deep into the superhuman range of thinking speeds. They sent me home. It'll wear off in a few hours, they said, which will seem like days to you. Try to use the residual effects to get some work done. Catch up on work emails while you're still in high-speed mode. The ride home was horrible. It was only 3 metro stops, and in real-world time, it only took about 35 minutes, but in my drug-accelerated hypertime, it felt like days. Days. Just walking out of the medical research suite to the elevator seemed like it took an hour. I sprinted out of the office, willing my legs to push me faster, but the laws of biomechanics held me prisoner. As accelerated as my brain was, I couldn't do anything to make my legs work faster. The huge disconnect between my body and mind made it extremely difficult to judge how and when to slow down, turn, or rotate my body. I had basically turned into a giant, slow-motion spaz. I misjudged my speed and rammed into the wall by the elevator button at a pretty good speed. Even though I could see the wall coming at me, I couldn't make my finger, outstretched to hit the elevator button, move away fast enough, and I jammed it against the wall, hard. The pain was intense. If my brain had been running at regular speed, it probably only would have hurt for 30 seconds or so, but in my accelerated state, the intense pain seemed to last for half an hour, 45 minutes maybe. The elevator ride was horrible. It felt like I spent 4 or 5 hours just descending 7 floors, with nothing to look at but the interior of the elevator car. It seems like time is going by slower and slower and slower. I sprinted to the metro station. I have to admit, this part was almost fun. Even though my body moved at what seemed to me super slow speed, I could still carefully choose how and where to place my feet, swing my arms, and turn my torso. It only took a block or two getting used to having a brain that ran 24 times faster than my body. Then I basically sprint danced the rest of the way, twisting and juking between people on the sidewalk and dodging moving cars with inches, aka minutes, of clearance. I spent an hour, in my time frame, descending into the subway and running to the platform. Endless tedium waiting the 6 minutes for the Red Line train to arrive, although there was more to look at on the metro platform than inside the elevator. It was still intensely boring. I should have stolen that copy of Moby Dick. The Red Line train roared into the station in slow motion. The normally high-pitched squeal of its brakes was frequency shifted by my high-speed mind to a long, low tone, like a monotone tuba solo. It wasn't just the squealing subway train that was 3 octaves lower than normal. All sound was slowed to the point of near inaudibility. Voices were gone, shifted below the threshold frequency of my hearing. I did manage to hear a screaming baby on my way to the subway car. Her shrieks slowed to sound like whale songs. Sharp sounds like car horns or trucks bouncing over potholes were low, muddied roars like distant thunder. Back at the research offices, I could still hear and communicate with the research staff, but now verbal communication with anyone would be impossible. The effects of the drug were still intensifying. I spent what seemed like days on that Red Line train, days listening to the whale song of the screaming baby and the tuba solo of the brakes. Where ordinary voices were frequency shifted out of my audio range, smells didn't seem to be affected. I never became nose blind to the body odor, the stench of the train's brakes, and the melange of farts and other smells wafting through the metro car. I finally got back to my apartment. Sprinting through my open door and into the front hall at full speed was like a slow, relaxing drift down a lazy river. I was relieved to be home. At least I had stuff I could do there. I picked up the book I was reading, 100 Years of Solitude. That's ironic. And finished it, despite turning the pages so quickly that I tore many of them. It seemed like most of the time I spent finishing the book was spent on page turning and not actually reading. 3 minutes had passed since I got home. I tried surfing the internet. My God, it takes a long time for computers to boot these days. But it was too frustratingly slow. Hours to load each new page and a fraction of a second to read it. 100 articles in my newsfeed read in just 3 minutes, done. I dipped into my pile of yet-to-be read books and finished 2 more. 4 more minutes had passed. I decided to try to sleep off the remaining effects of the drug. Unfortunately, whatever part of my mind is responsible for perception, the part that's been accelerated to hyperspeeds by the drug, isn't the same as the part that governs sleep. Despite being awake for what I perceived as days, my physical brain still thought it was 1:25 p.m. It was not ready for sleep. Nevertheless, I tried to sleep. I walked to my bedroom, a slow 45-minute drift through my apartment, and flung myself into bed, lazily falling like a feather onto the mattress. I closed my eyes and lay there for hours and hours, 10 minutes of reality time, before giving up. Sleep would not come. I was facing what was going to feel like days, or maybe even weeks of being trapped in a slow-motion prison. So, I took Ambien. The sensation of the pill and the splash of water I used to swallow it sliding my throat was sickening. A lump that blocked my breathing, moving like a slug down my esophagus. I read a book. 10 minutes had passed. I read another. 18 minutes since I took the Ambien. I threw the book across the room in disgust at my situation. The book slowly pirouetted and spun through the air, like a leaf blowing in the breeze. It hit the wall with a long, faint rumble, the only sound I had heard for what seemed like hours, then drifted to the floor like a flip-flop sinking in a swimming pool. The force of gravity hadn't changed since I took the pill. The laws of physics were the same. It was just my perception of time that had gone wackadoo. This meant I could use the speed things seemed to fall as a way of judging the effects of the drug. Based on how long it took the book to drift to the floor, I estimated the effects of the drug were still intensifying. I read a magazine, I turned on the television, I clearly saw each frame of video like I was watching a slideshow. Frustrated, I turned the television off. I read some more. The first 2 books of Churchill's A History of the English-Speaking Peoples. Not exactly a light read. Frankly, I hated it, but given the hours of tedium it would take to go get another book off my bookshelf, just sitting on the couch and reading Churchill was better. Or at least less worse. It had now been 35 minutes since I took the Ambien. I lay down on the couch and closed my eyes. Time passed. I inhaled. An hours-long process. Time passed. I exhaled for more hours. Sleep would not come. I needed a new plan. I decided to go back to the offices where they gave me the drug. Maybe they would have something that could counteract its effects, or at least something to knock me out until it wore off. I exited my apartment as fast as possible, taking hours in my time, framed to do so. I don't even bother locking the door. It would have taken too long. Down the stairs, it's faster than the elevator if you run, through the lobby, out the front door, and onto the street. These few things felt like a long day at the office. Sprinting down the street, dancing and weaving between pedestrians with what must have looked to them superhuman dexterity, down the first flight of stairs at the metro, across the landing, another hour, then on to the second flight of stairs. That's when the Ambien hit me. The Ambien didn't make me sleepy, not at all. Instead, it must have had a severe cross-reaction with the experimental drug I took this morning. I was bounding down the second flight of stairs, moving in slow motion, but still making perceptible progress. Then, wham, everything stopped. The dull roar of the street and metro noise ceased, replaced by the most perfect silence I've ever experienced. My downwards motion seemed to completely freeze before the Ambien kicked in. My perception of time was maybe a few hundred times slower than real time. After the Ambien took effect, time moved thousands of times slower. Every second seemed like days to me. Even just moving my eyes to focus on a new point was like an impossibly slow scroll across my visual field. Over the course of the afternoon, I learned how to walk, run, and jump when my mind ran hundreds of times faster than my body. But with another 4 or 5 orders of magnitude of slowdown caused by the Ambien, body control was almost impossible. I fell on the stairs. Even though I was all but frozen in mid-step, controlling my muscles was impossible. I commanded my foot forwards for hours, then backwards for hours, more when it seemed like I would just miss the next step. Hours attempting to adjust the angle of my ankle, then readjusting when it felt wrong. Despite these efforts, I rolled my ankle on the next step. The pain wasn't at all mitigated by the slowness. Hours of increasing strain on my bent ankle. The nerve signals that send pain into the brain must work differently than the nerves in my ear. Sonic energy was spread out over time, diluted until it was imperceptible. Pain flowed into my brain undiluted by the change in my perception of time. Hours and hours of increasing weight on my ankle turned into hours of increasing pain upon increasing pain. I pitched forwards, my high-speed mind completely unable to control my low-speed body. I drifted downwards for days, managing to rotate my torso enough to keep my head from impacting the ground first. I eventually landed on my right shoulder. At first, the impact wasn't even noticeable. Then I felt a slight pressure in my shoulder as it came in contact with the ground. The pressure grew, bringing increasing pain for hour upon hour. My shoulder finally gave out, popping out of its socket with an endless sickening tug. I came to a stop days later, crumpled onto the ground, staring at the ceiling. The pain in my shoulders still screaming with the intensity of a fresh, violent injury. I had plenty of time to think during that fall. If every second seemed like days to me, then each minute of real-world time would be like years. Even if the drug cleared out of my system in the next 2 or 3 hours, this nightmare would seem to last centuries. By the time I hit the ground, I had a plan. I would somehow get to the platform and throw myself in front of a train. I twisted onto my hands and knees, days of my dislocated shoulder crying for relief. I misjudged my rotation and rolled onto my back. I tried again, collapsing onto my face as I tried to figure out how to control a body that moved slower than grass grew. Weeks of effort were finally rewarded with success. I stabilized on my hands and knees. If just getting on all fours was this difficult, I figured that walking or running was completely out of the question. So I crawled. I crawled through the metro tunnel. The dumb looks on the faces in the crowd lingered on me for weeks. I crawled under the turnstile and onto the escalator. The escalator spilled the rush hour crowd onto the platform at the same speed a glacier spills ice into the sea. I looked out over the crowded platform during my interminable downward ride. The train status sign said the next train wouldn't arrive for 20 minutes. 20 minutes was like a year to me. I'd have to spend a year on the metro platform, waiting to die. I crawled off the escalator, enduring days of stupid expressions on the commuters' faces. I crawled a few feet to a concrete bench and curled up next to it, trying to find a position to lessen the pain in my shoulder. Then my problem with time got worse. Impossibly worse. The massive slowdown on the stairs was just the beginning of the interaction between the experimental drug and the Ambien. It fully hit me while I was curled up by the bench. I blinked. Years of darkness followed. Sound was already gone, and with my blink, sight was gone as well. All that existed was the pain from my fall. My hyper-accelerated mind wasted no input compensating for the lack of sensory input. Voices spoke to me. They sung to me in languages that never existed. Patterns and faces and colors came and went in my mind's eye. I recalled my whole life and imagined living another. I forgot English. I settled into a profound despair. I spoke to God. I became God. I imagined a new universe and brought it to life with my thoughts. Then I did it all again, and again. My eyes opened with geologic slowness. A faint glow. Weeks. A slit of light. Weeks. A narrow view of the metro platform. Ankles of the commuters near me and an advertisement on the opposite wall. I extracted my phone from my pocket. A project that spanned decades. How can I even explain the boredom? The pain in my shoulder is nothing compared to the boredom. Every thought I can think, I have thought hundreds of times already. The view of ankles and advertisements never changes. Never. The boredom is so intense, it's tangible, like a solid object of metal and stone wedged into my skull, inescapable. What are my options? If I crawl and fall onto the tracks without an oncoming train to crush me, I won't die. I'll experience even more pain from the 4-foot tall fall, but I'll most likely be rescued by some do-gooder on the platform and unable to act when the train finally does arrive. My suffering in that scenario will be endless. So, I wait for the train so I can throw myself under it. When it finally hits me, I will experience the pain of being ripped into pieces for centuries until finally the light of life leaves my brain, and my experience ends. I've lived hundreds of lifespans at the foot of this bench. I am far older, in spirit, than any human who has ever lived. Most of my life experience has been a snapshot of pain huddled on the floor of a subway platform, with an unchanging view of ankles and advertisements. This post is my plan B, my Hail Mary, my long shot. I've spent lifetimes typing and posting this message in the hope that someone will read it and become convinced that my suffering must end. Someone on this platform right now, someone who will find the man curled under the bench, the man who crawled down the escalator, and kill him as swiftly as possible. A bullet to the temple. If you're armed and at the Glenmont Metro, please shoot me. So there's this movie that came out in 2024 called Lucy. It was really popular. I think a lot of people have probably seen it, but I'm reading off Google right now. She absorbs an experimental drug that unlocks her brain's full capacity. By the end of the film, her physical body dissolves and she merges with computers, becomes a sentient supercomputer. Whenever I read this story originally, it really made me think of this movie. Yeah, this story would make a great movie. Anyways, here's the next one. It's from r/NoSleep from user Unalloyed Saint Trina. My sister can communicate through flesh. I need to speak with her one last time, no matter the cost. In the 14 years we'd worked at that goddamn sweatshop, Sylvia never missed a shift. So when she didn't show up one winter morning, a sour dread swept through my gut. I called her. The line didn't even ring. Something was wrong. I left without permission and began sprinting across the city, slipping across patches of ice concealed beneath the snowfall, frigid air biting at my lungs. She'd spoken oddly on the phone the night before, slurring her words, gushing about the beautiful truths we could discover about Mom within the mangrove forests of Ecuador. All I had to do was finally agree to take the trip with her. She claimed it would be a pilgrimage, a means of healing through communion with our mother's birth country. If we could connect with her, if we could comprehend the tiniest sliver of why she abandoned us, maybe we could forgive her. Maybe we could move on. It was ridiculous, borderline delusional. There was nothing for us in Ecuador. Besides, what could the mangroves teach us about Mom that we hadn't already learned the day she discarded us, her only children, on the streets of Chicago? I kept my mouth shut, though. Sylvia worked hard to salvage our lives. Putting my callous soul on display felt like spitting in her face. Instead, I rolled my eyes, assumed her drunk, and choked out my annual refrain. We'll go next year, I promise. I never had any intention of saying yes. I had plenty of chances to change my mind, but year after year, I coldly withstood her heartfelt pleas. I'd be lying if I said I didn't experience a similar longing, a yearning for answers that would sometimes keep me up at night, but I suppressed it, forced it down deep. Visiting her country was a symbol, an act of forgiveness. My mother did not deserve forgiveness. Screw her, and screw that putrid soil that supported her miserable feet. I would not go to that place, not even for Sylvia. And yet, despite the belief that my stubbornness was completely justified, all I could think about as I raced through the snowfall was the cruel deceit of those 6 little words. We'll go next year, I promise. I arrived at Sylvia's a little after dawn. Dense overcast stained her towering apartment complex in ashen gray. I slammed into the fire exit with the broken lock and began bolting up the stairs. Cockroaches skittered from my aching heels. Before long, I was in front of apartment 602, fumbling with my spare key, praying I was wrong, praying my bleak intuition was wildly off the mark. The door jerked open. Hazy light from the hallway trickled into her jet black apartment. I felt my body go numb. She was on the floor, face down, sprawled out, transfixed and rigid. Her corpse harbored this strange brightness. Her skin seemed to glow in the darkness, shimmering a dull crimson like molten metal that had begun to cool. Carbon monoxide can do that, apparently. The coroner detailed the pathology to me with a tone-deaf excitement, shaking his wrinkled hands, talking himself breathless. Carbon monoxide is greedy, he said. The odorless gas hijacks your blood. That piracy alters the blood cells, displacing precious oxygen and brightening them in the process. That's why the corpse is flush. Suffocation makes them shine like a dying star. The whole thing tore me apart. I couldn't swallow the raw brutality of it. Sylvia died alone, completely without ceremony, a quick and meaningless end to a hard-fought life. When we were abandoned, Chicago was bursting at the seams with strays. The city wouldn't have saved us. If social services didn't have enough resources to rescue their own children, what chance did a pair of non-natives have? My sister refused to just lie down and die, though. She found a job. The man running the sweatshop wouldn't allow a 5-year-old to hang around the factory floor, so while Sylvia toiled away in the front of a sewing machine, I hid in the alleyway behind the factory. Tucked myself snugly behind this massive battleship of a dumpster at the crack of dawn, and I wouldn't come out until I heard Sylvia knocking a code into the rusted metal, usually well after the sun had set. The hiding spot required painful contortion. Some nights, my leg spasms were so violent that she'd have to carry me to whatever underpass we were currently calling home. Before winter, though, Sylvia had earned enough money. We moved what little we had to a tiny apartment in the projects. Once I was old enough, she got me a job at the factory, too. The sweatshop was a marginal improvement over the dumpster. The smell inside was slightly less foul, and my calves had a little more wiggle room, though I couldn't seem to escape the gaze of this lanky boy with pale blue eyes and a cleft upper lip. It took him a few months to work up the nerve to talk to me, but we quickly became inseparable. A decade later, Ryan and I welcomed our daughter into the world. Elisa was about to turn 6 when Sylvia died. I don't want a party this year. She was sulking at the table, stirring a bowl of leathery slush that had once been Cheerios. I barely registered what she had said. I was standing at the sink, staring at the wall, pretending to wash dishes. The near scalding water felt good on my hands. "Why's that, sweetheart?" Ryan chirped. "Well, Auntie Sil isn't getting one, so..." Elisa stood, trudged across the kitchen, and dumped the disintegrated cereal into the basin. "It's not fair," she continued. "None of it seems fair. Life isn't fair." The caustic response spilled from my lips like a quiet exhale, automatic and thoughtless. When I realized what I'd said, I shifted towards Elisa. She was studying me with wide, unblinking eyes. Her grimace betrayed a painful confusion. This was her first brush with death. Painful confusion had been her default setting for weeks. Her eyes became glassy. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but all that came out was hot air. Ryan scooped her into his arms and forced a smile. "Mommy's not mad, okay? She's just really tired. Want to go watch some TV?" She pressed her face into his chest and nodded. As he paced out of the kitchen, Ryan shot me a look. That look. Mommy may not have been mad, but Daddy sure was. There was a distant click. The muffled pandemonium of Saturday morning cartoons started echoing through our small home. I sighed and turned off the faucet. Much as I'd been enjoying the hurt, the scalding water had reddened my hands. The sight of flushed skin made me want to vomit. Ryan marched back into the kitchen, broad feet slapping against the hardwood. I stuck my hands into my pockets, closed my eyes, and braced myself. "The hell was that?" he hissed. I shrugged. "What, you disagree? You think what happened to Sil is fair?" "My God, that is not the point." My blood ignited. I spun around to face him. "Oh, I'm sorry. I had no idea there was a point. Please, Ryan, enlighten me." He glanced towards the living room. keep your voice down." I stomped up to him and spat out a single word. "Why?" I glared at him. There was another distant click, followed by a high-pitched, muted sob. I heard Elisa too, but I would not yield. I wanted him to fight back. His jaw tightened, but abruptly went slack. He looked away from me, a reaction more damaging than any insult. "Jesus, where are you right now, Carmen?" I cocked my head, but he didn't elaborate. He walked off to attend to Elisa, leaving me in the kitchen to puzzle over what the hell he meant. In retrospect, I think I understand. He was asking me to get a grip, begging me to divest my selfish wrath and realize what's important. The question's effect on me, however, was much more literal than Ryan intended. Where was I? Chicago. But was that where I should be? I couldn't get that question out of my head. I kept repeating it, incessant and deafening. Then it hit me. I figured out where I should be. I took a clandestine trip to a nearby pawn shop. My engagement ring wasn't worth that much. The stone was only half carat, after all, but it was enough. $800 would cover the plane tickets and a few nights in a hostel. I know how it sounds, but I had a plan. Sylvia wasn't the only one who died from the gas leak, so there were talks of a class action lawsuit against the landlord. As if anything in this world can be considered a guarantee, I convinced myself that those earnings would surely buy the ring back someday. I started to leave around midnight. Our home was silent, save for my husband's wispy snores and the soft hum of the TV. I slung my backpack over my shoulders and tiptoed into the living room. They had fallen asleep together on the sofa. I stared at Ryan for a while, watching the TV bejewel his closed eyelids with an opaline flicker. He was going to be furious, but I would never come to terms with her death until I did this. It was my way of making amends. I stuck the post-it note onto his cell phone before slipping out into the cold, moonless night. "Flying to Ecuador, back in 2 days. Will text you to let you know I'm safe." Then, on the adhesive side, a last-minute addition. "Tell Elisa I love her." I landed in Quito at noon. Exiting onto the tarmac, I was struck by an intense disorientation. The flight crew warned us that we might experience altitude sickness. Quito is nearly 10,000 feet above sea level, but I had no idea how immediate and debilitating it would be. The sun was blinding. My head pounded. Every breath was a struggle. Compared to Chicago's thin ozone, the thick tropical air felt like inhaling jelly. Hesitation festered in those breathless moments, but I squashed it. I couldn't turn back. I needed to see this through. I collapsed onto a bench outside the airport, took as deep a breath as I could manage, and switched my phone off airplane mode. A flurry of texts and missed calls flooded the screen, notification after notification. The device was practically convulsing. I sent "landed, I'm okay" to Ryan without letting my eyes linger on the 20 unread texts above. Then I called for a cab. Once they arrived, I returned the device to airplane mode. Quito is at the center of Ecuador, but my destination was closer to the coastline. That's where the mangroves bloom. Whenever she tried to sell me on this pilgrimage, Sylvia always harped on the mangroves. I never asked why, though I suspect she was channeling some fragment of Mom, some piece of her that I had forgotten. Sylvia was 12 when we were abandoned. I was 5. She actually had some memories of the woman. Maybe Mom harped on them too. Maybe the mangroves made her nostalgic for home. All things considered, a nature reserve seemed as good a spot as any for a healing communion with the land. It wasn't hard to narrow down which I'd visit. A few miles north of Pedernal, there was a small park that just seemed right. I didn't know much about it, but for whatever reason, I couldn't see myself going anywhere else. Luckily, it was beautiful. I was reluctant to acknowledge the beauty at first, but as I stood on the shoreline, basking in the grandeur of what was effectively a tropical swamp, I felt my reluctance melt away. Mangrove roots rose in tangled clusters from the salt water, ornate yet chaotic, spiraling closer and closer together until they unified as a single trunk. Their canopy was fiercely animated. Small monkeys with slender arms and pot-bellies swung through the brush in chains. Exotic birds zipped between branches, vibrant blurs of color swirling together to manifest a shifting kaleidoscope made with golds and violets and deep, deep reds. I dipped my toes in the water and stared at the forest, and I felt full, buoyant, happy even. Then, with a single thought, I crumbled. Sylvia should have been here too. I'd been such an asshole. I stewed on the shore for a long while, marinating in an acidic mixture of self-loathing and melancholy, until something odd caught my attention. A man, lurking in my peripheral vision. His head was peeking out of the river, wet eyes leering at me through thick strands of soggy gray hair. My eyes snapped forward. There was a stone bobbing on the surface of the river, but no spying man. I whispered the word idiot as I turned to leave the reserve. It was an hour-and-a-half walk to the nearest hostel. I had enough money to afford another cab, but I didn't call one. I didn't deserve the luxury. I lurched along the roadside, head low, bare shoulders baking in the afternoon sun, becoming more despondent with each miserable step. The lush, rolling countryside was exceptionally quiet, a far cry from the ceaseless bluster of Chicago. Under different circumstances, I would have welcomed the tranquility. In the moment, though, the empty air only made the voice in my head seem louder. Why was I here? What did I expect to gain? Insight, absolution, levity, stupid. It was all so stupid, so short-sighted, so goddamn pointless. All of a sudden, my ears perked. There was a soft, steady crunching a few yards back. The sound of dry grass being crushed under a boot heel. Was someone following me? I paused. The crunching stopped. I balled my hand into a fist, took a deep breath, and whipped my head around. But there was no one. Just the winding road and the sleepy hills. My heart rate slowed. When I started walking, the crunching resumed. I peered over my shoulder, still nothing behind me. I did my best to ignore the unsettling phenomenon, but by the time I arrived at the hostel, the sun was setting. My calves were screaming, and my mind was ragged. In other words, I was ready for a drink. Okay, guys, I have absolutely no clue who could be following the OP. Maybe the OP's mom? That would be crazy. Anyways, let's continue. My memories of that night are disturbingly incomplete. Here's what I do remember. It begins with me at the back of this dimly lit dive bar. I'm brooding, throwing back liquor at a reckless pace, when I'm suddenly approached by a well-dressed man. He's sporting an indigo blazer and black chinos, overdressed for the stifling heat. Up close, he smells like brine. The table wobbles when he leans on it, one leg shorter than the others. He steadies my glass with 2 fingers so it doesn't fall. A small wave of brandy laps at his gaunt fingertips. He takes his hand out of my glass and sits down. I can't remember whether he introduced himself or just sat down and started talking. Called himself Michael. Michael, something like that. Over and over, he apologizes. I ask him, "What for?" He claims I already know, but I make him spell it out. For Sylvia, he says, for the way she asphyxiated on perfectly good air, for the way the gas toyed with her mind, for the terror of her last moments, hallucinating alone in a lightless apartment, for everything really. Wait, did I tell you all this? He says I probably did, then he keeps talking. I'm not sure what about. I'm distracted by the whites of his eyes. There's movement. Pinpoints appear, enlarge, and then dissolve, sort of like film grain. The rhythm is hypnotic. I'm comfortably spellbound until he says something that catches my attention. Would you like to commune with your sister? Slowly, with apprehension, I nod. From there, my recollection really fragments. There are breaks, skips in time, pieces I've lost. I follow him out of the bar, stumbling. I slip on the edge of the door frame, plunge forward, and close my eyes, preparing myself for the impact, but there's nothing. No collision, no shattering bones, just a clean emptiness, a starving void. When I open my eyes, we're in a van, and Michael's driving. I don't see anyone else, but there's laughter, so much laughter. Thousands of shrill, squeaking cackles coming from the driver's seat. An excruciating cacophony, enraged wasps probing my eardrums. Welcome home, little leech. Don't be afraid. Your baptism is overdue, but it'll be over before you know it, he says. We're accelerating. I can tell by how the darkened countryside is passing by. Faster and faster. I plead for him to stop the car, but I can't even hear the words leaving my mouth. And Michael's not even watching the road anymore. He's twisted over the seat, leering at me, pinpoints dancing across the whites of his eyes, and then quiet. In an instant, the laughter's gone. Salty air scrapes my tongue. A bird trills far overhead. I look around. I'm sitting at the front of a small rowboat, floating down a narrow river, hemmed in by gnarled webs of mangrove roots. Moonlight drapes a faint silver membrane over the otherwise shadow-swelled landscape. Behind me, I hear someone rowing. I know it's Michael, but I don't dare turn around and check. Do you see her? He whispers. I squint, carefully searching the root beds. My heart is stammering. My thoughts are frantic. How the hell did I get here? What is going on? Do you see your sister, Carmen? He moans. The blackness is nearly impenetrable, but I look closer because I desperately want her to be there. Because I need to tell Sylvia that I love her and that I'm sorry. I knew something was wrong the night she died, but I didn't in fact. I could hear it in her voice when she spoke on the phone, but I chose to ignore it, because the way she talked about Mom made me so goddamn angry. I could have saved her like she saved me, but I didn't. My eyes widened. I think I see something downstream. I convince myself something's there, a nebulous shape looming within the palisade of mangroves. My body's drifting forward, over the lip of the boat. I murmur my sister's name. Sylvia? I wait. A hand streaked with crimson skin erupts from the brackish water. Bloated fingers wrap around my wrist and pull. I don't have time to scream. I lose my balance and topple over the side of the boat, dragged under by the flushed red hand. Water surges into my chest when I attempt to breathe. Mud seeps into my stomach, causing it to spasm. I thrash, but it does nothing to slow my descent. My fingers hunt for something to anchor onto. I can't determine if my eyes are opened or closed. The darkness is all-consuming. I feel myself slipping away. Suddenly, something cold and sturdy grazes my palm. I use my remaining energy to squeeze it. The surface is smooth like metal. It's round, and it fits nicely in my palm. Reflexively, I turn my wrist. There's a creak. My foot drifts forward and somehow finds solid ground. I'm stepping into my home? The door slams shut behind me. Ryan is racing down the hallway. I double over, coughing, hacking like there's something stuck in my lungs. My vision is dappled with tiny pulsing dots. You don't remember anything about how you got home? The park bench squeaked as Ryan slid closer. He was sweating. His eyes darted between me and Elisa, who was pedaling her bicycle along a nearby footpath. I massaged his stone shoulders. No, I really don't. I was at the bar top, drinking. Some guy came up and bothered me, said some strange shit, but he was harmless. Then, 24 hours later, I'm home. I pause, preparing another lie. But in between, nothing at all? Elisa, what did I say? Stay where I can see you. Startled, Elisa wobbled, then tumbled off her bike, landing knees first onto the pavement. Come here, love, I called out. Elisa pulled herself together, stood, and then began plodding over to us, dragging her bike by the handlebars. Fresh blood glistened across her kneecaps. I stopped the massage and started rifling through my purse. Never went anywhere without a few band-aids and Neosporin since we took off her training wheels. She slumped on the grass next to me, bleary-eyed. Can I try to fix it? Her lips cracked into a delicate smile. I bent over and began smearing the antiseptic on her abraded skin. And the guy you mentioned, the one in the suit, you don't think he, took advantage of the situation? What? I asked, lifting my head and throwing it over my shoulder. Brian's pale blue eyes were wide and damp. Took me a second to realize what he was dancing around. For whatever reason, that was the farthest thing from my mind. Oh, no, I don't think that freak did anything inappropriate. Relief flooded over him. His shoulders seemed the slightest bit looser as he blotted a few tears with his shirt collar. Thank God. That said, maybe he spiked my drink? Not with roofies, with, I don't know, a hallucinogen? Something that could explain the amnesia. Can't say why anyone would dose a complete stranger, but my voice trailed off. Out of nowhere, every cell in my body began to buzz, and my attention was drawn to a man limping past us. His name was Mateo. He was well known in the neighborhood as a sweet but self-destructive man. Uncontrolled diabetes had ravaged his body. He couldn't see well, couldn't feel much below the waist, and worst of all, there was his foot, or what was left of it. From the shin down, the appendage was gangrenous, black like a cannonball, and as cold as sleet, with a stench that could likely be appreciated from the upper atmosphere. When the tissue first went tits up, Mateo refused to get it amputated. We all assumed his days were numbered, and yet, years later, here he was, seesawing his way around, panhandling like usual. The necrotic tissue just never got infected, even though it absolutely should have. A perverse and sadistic miracle. Today, though, something was different. The flesh was moving, churning. The blackened skin peeking out from his dirt-caked sneaker snapped and bubbled like boiling tar, surreal and revolting. I looked to his face. He wasn't in pain. He wasn't in distress. He wore the hollow smile and the vacant eyes of a lifelong scavenger, same as he always did. Nausea clawed at the back of my throat. I told myself it wasn't real. I tried to tear my eyes away, but God, I couldn't. There was something bewitching about the way his flesh churned. A pattern, meaning concealed within its beats and cadences. Something that needed to be felt to be completely understood. A tactile language like Braille. The tips of my fingers began throbbing. Bizarre notions took root in my mind. The way his flesh moved, something about it reminded me of Sylvia's voice? No, I thought, that's absurd. But was it absurd? Speech is just a series of vibrations, right? Vibrations that could just as easily swim through dead meat as they could living vocal cords. No, I needed to get a grip. There was another explanation. I was exhausted. I was still under the effect of some hallucinogen. I was sick. No matter what I threw at it, though, the notion persisted. Some part of her was in that dead flesh. It was a paradox. The notion made no sense, and yet I'd never felt so sure of something. And all I had to do to know for certain was feel it move. I needed to touch Mateo's whispering foot. Needed to burrow my fingers into the rot until I heard what she was saying. Ah, Mommy! Elisa's screech brought me back to reality. My lungs ached. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in minutes. Sorry, love. Here it is. I ripped the paper tabs from the Band-Aid and stuck it on her knee, only half paying attention, keeping Mateo fixed in my peripheral vision until he was well and truly out of sight. It was agonizing to let him go, like allowing free heroin to slip from your grasp when you're in seething withdrawal. I turned to Ryan. He was looking in Mateo's direction too, but his expression was flat and unbothered. He couldn't see what I could. As we left the park, Ryan made me promise to see a physician this week to address the amnesia, and a therapist within the month to address everything else. His conditions for forgiving my impulsive excursion abroad. I promised I would. That said, my mind was elsewhere. Michael, whoever he was, claimed he was granting me the ability to commune with Sylvia. Was this it? Did the communion require some sort of medium, flesh, as the interface between the living and the dead? Had I missed my opportunity? I can only answer the last of those three questions. I hadn't missed my opportunity because I knew which alleyway Mateo slept in at night. The next morning, I returned to the factory for the first time since Sylvia's death. It was a strange and lonely homecoming. Not only was Sylvia gone, but Ryan was absent as well. The flu had been doing the rounds at Elisa's school. It was only a matter of time until she contracted it. He implored me to call out and take care of her, but I told him that was a bad idea. Although our workplace was much less exploitive than it had been when we initially signed on, it was still run by a merciless organization whose patience could only be tested so much. Since he had continued to work while I was out on the few days of bereavement my manager would afford me, it was important that I show my face. There was a blissful normality to the labor. The droning hum of the many sewing machines, the repetitive movements, the familiarity of the routine. The comfort, however, was fleeting. Before long, my fingertips began to throb. I thought of Mateo's whispering foot. Then my manager approached. Grace was a large woman with patchy gray hair and close-set eyes that seemed equally devoid of color. She stood over my station, tapping her foot as if she were waiting for me to do something, though I couldn't say what. Without warning, she started berating me. In essence, she was accusing Ryan and me of some sort of conspiracy, an attempt to defraud them. Why had there been only one of us present at any given time? What exactly were we trying to pull? Something to that effect. I don't remember precisely what she said. I couldn't focus on her paranoid rant. I was too distracted by her tongue. The flesh was whispering to me. Sylvia's voice, it was in there. I could tell by the way the wet muscle vibrated. I'd do anything to speak to my sister again, right? Yes, I would. I leapt from my chair, hand outstretched, reaching for her mouth. The suddenness of my outburst caught Grace off guard. She yelled, "Get back, you!" before my fingers interrupted her. I cradled her tongue in my palm and pressed my fingertips into the warm, wriggling flesh. A panicked scream reverberated through the small bones on my wrist. I could feel Sylvia. I could almost hear her, too. She was trying to tell me something, but her voice was muffled, coarse with static like a call with a shoddy connection. As Grace's teeth began to clamp down, I dragged my fingertips across her tongue, arranging them into various configurations, trying to locate the pattern that would amplify this divine signal. Pain exploded across the back of my hand. I launched my arm back and ripped my hand from her mouth. Strips of skin peeled away under the pressure of her front teeth. The force caused Grace to fall backward onto the floor. I stared at the traumatized woman. Blood trickled from her trembling lips. Her eyes were bulging, ripe with shock and fear. People were gathering around us. No one was exactly sure what happened. I shoved my injured hand into my pants pocket and pushed through the crowd. You'd think I'd have left the factory horrified and ashamed, but I walked home with a smile pinned to my jaw. I felt incredible. Waves of euphoria rushed through my body and collected at my fingertips. I was close. I was so very close. The police didn't come knocking that night. I was thankful, but not entirely surprised. Maybe I mangled Grace's tongue and she couldn't speak. Maybe she didn't want the law snooping around the factory. The reason didn't matter. All that mattered was what I planned on doing next. Ryan was exhausted and turned in early. Elisa had been a handful, apparently. Again, I was thankful, and I didn't bother asking questions. It felt like the world was paving the way, removing every barrier, keeping me on a certain course. A path that could easily be confused for fate. Once I was sure my family was asleep, I left to find Mateo. The city was eerily quiet. I jogged from block to block without the urban white noise I was accustomed to, the blaring sirens and the distant music and the drunken chatter of passerbys. The night was silent and black, like the river in the mangrove forest I may have drowned in. It was unnerving, but not enough to send me home. Not even enough to slow me down. The euphoria I'd experienced earlier had completely disappeared. The throbbing in my fingertips resurfaced, worse than ever. The pain was severe enough that I needed to cover my mouth with my uninjured hand and muffle a wail. I was approaching Mateo's alley, and I didn't want the noise to scare him off. My wail gradually died down, and the pain briefly subsided. But as I pulled my palm away, I caught a glimpse of fingertips in the murky glow of a street lamp. They were swollen. Pockets of clear fluid stretched the skin to its absolute limit in some places, surpassing it in others, creating paper-cut-sized slits that leaked blood-tinged fluid. What the hell was happening to me? Better yet, where the hell was my head? I was shulking through the city in the dead of night, presumably unemployed, with a sick kid at home to, what? Commune with Sylvia through the flesh of some poor man. Yes, a voice in my mind said. That's exactly what I was going to do. That voice grew louder, and the impulse grew stronger, and eventually my legs began moving again. I wasn't jogging anymore. I was sprinting. Angry drivers blasted their horns as I raced across busy streets. I could have been hit, but I didn't care. I was focused. I was close. Mateo lived behind a local coffee shop. My heart sang when I saw their sign at the end of the block. I slowed my pace, steadied my breathing, and crept into the alleyway. A figure lay motionless atop a heated vent. Steam rose from beneath them, caressing their outline, giving them a shape in the inky darkness. His foot is necrotic, I reminded myself. Dead tissue means dead nerves. I might frighten him, but he won't feel any pain. I knelt down beside him, mesmerized by the vibrations radiating across his naked shin. I plunged my swollen fingertips into his flesh. There was resistance, much more than I anticipated. Then warmth licking my fingertips and a high-pitched, guttural scream. Not the scream of an old man. The figure scrambled away from me. I caught a glimpse of their face in the moonlight. It was a young man with long hair and a deep scar transecting one of their eyebrows. They bolted from me, and I didn't give chase. The mistake was sobering. I terrorized and maimed a stranger for nothing. Absolutely nothing. My stomach heaved. I stumbled to my feet and fled from the alleyway. Salty tears stung my eyes. My mind seemed irreparably fractured. As I bolted home, it kept flipping back and forth between two opposing conclusions. I was broken, lost, and completely insane. No, that's not it. I was given a gift, baptized in secret waters. I could commune with Sylvia. I could tell her I loved her, tell her I was sorry, and I was close. I just needed to keep trying. When I slinked through the front door, nothing had changed. No winner had been decided. It felt like I was being torn apart from the inside out. I staggered through our home, gripping my head with both hands like my skull would fall apart if I didn't hold it together. I pushed open our bedroom door and stepped through. Ryan was snoring, sound asleep. He'd help me. I'd wake him up, show him my fingers, tell him about Michael, beg for his forgiveness, and... I stopped at the side of our bed and stood still. His entire body appeared to be vibrating. Every inch of visible skin was churning, silently swaying, undulating with Sylvia's voice, especially his eyelids, which rippled like the tide before a storm, graceful and treacherous. I reached both hands out. I hovered a thumb over each eyelid. She's in there. Sylvia's in his flesh too. My mind demanded my muscles press down, not hard enough to kill him, just hard enough to sunder his naked flesh, to rip him open and baptize his viscera. Do it, a voice inside me screamed. My thumbs shook. I was about to give in. I could practically feel the green-lit impulse flying down my nervous system, but before it arrived at my thumbs, my eyes landed on my empty ring finger. The memory of pawning my engagement ring flashed through my mind. Disbelief surged through my body. Why the hell would I do something so cruel? That's not who I am. That's not how Sylvia raised me to be. My muscles relaxed. I moved my hands away. My mind felt clear for the first time in weeks, and I came to a realization. There's something dangerous living inside me, and it came from Ecuador. Night gradually turned to dawn. I remained in control, sipping stale coffee at the kitchen table, determining what to do next. The emergency room seemed like a safe choice, but some part of me resisted. They won't understand, they'll think I'm insane, and they'll lock me away. Of course, the question became, is that really what I think? Or is that a suggestion from the thing inside me? A way to prevent me from getting help? A shrill noise erupted from my cell phone. I nearly jumped out of my skin, dropping my mug in the process. It shattered on the kitchen tile, launching ceramic shrapnel in every direction. Damn it, I whispered, pulling the device from my pocket. Based on the sound, I assumed it was an Amber Alert. It wasn't. The notification read, Emergency Alert System. Contagious disease warning for your area until further notice. Remain indoors. Click here or turn to Channel 8 for details. A sour dread swept through my gut. I raced into the living room, turned on the TV, and flipped to Channel 8. There was a series of photographs on screen, squeezed between the news anchor and a banner that read, Outbreak of unknown contagion. Victims assaulted others before disease proved fatal. To my profound horror, I saw a man with a scar across his eyebrow and a large woman with gray hair and close-set eyes. There were 4 other pictures, but I didn't recognize any of them. I scrambled to unmute the TV. Originally thought to be under the influence due to their erratic behavior, health officials are now reporting that the perpetrators were likely suffering from some novel, rabies-like infection, though they refused to provide additional details for the time being. I felt someone tugging at my shirt sleeve. I spun around, heart pounding, relieved to just see a groggy Elisa rubbing the sleep from her eyes. When did we leave the park, Mom? I asked her to repeat herself, but the question didn't change. I said, when did we leave the park? We were there, now we're here. It doesn't make much sense. I don't remember the in-betweens. My heart fell through the floor. She didn't recall the previous 24 hours. She had amnesia. My eyes slowly drifted to the Band-Aid on her knee. I reached out a damp, trembling hand and peeled it off. There was a small, crescent-shaped trench over her kneecap. I carefully hovered my swollen finger above it. A perfect fit. I'm starting to believe my mom abandoned Sylvia and me for a very specific reason. I think she was creating distance, keeping us away from Ecuador and from herself. Because I'm infected with something from my mother's country. Something that wants to spread. Something that infiltrates your mind. Something that would have said anything to convince me to plunge my diseased fingers into another person's flesh. Worst of all, I've given it to my daughter too. Compared to my manager and the man in the alley, we seem to react differently to whatever this infection is. For whatever reason, it doesn't kill us. I suspect the truth is hidden in our bloodline. God, Elisa's a smart kid. Empathetic too. She picked up on my distress almost immediately, even if she didn't understand it. She hugged my leg, peered up at me with her pale blue eyes, and asked, So, what now? I swallowed my despair and forced a smile. I don't know, love. The pain in my fingertips was worsening. I was terrified for Elisa. The pain was coming for her too. All I know is, whatever we do, we'll do it together. I picked her up and started walking towards the door. And I won't leave your side again, okay? Promise? My smile grew. For the first time since Sylvia's death, it was real. Yes, Elisa, I promise. I don't know if this one would be a psychological terror horror. I think I just made up a genre, or if it'd be a thriller. The OP could be experiencing something supernatural or a complete mental collapse. So yeah, here's the next one. It's from r/no-sleep from user MoLogic. I work at a call center. A customer keeps calling to ask about things that haven't happened yet. I never thought I'd still be working at a call center at 28. That's the kind of thing you do in college, right? Something temporary to pay for textbooks and beer. But here I was, headset on, watching the queue numbers climb on my monitor while I tried not to think about the fact that my degree in marketing had gotten me exactly nowhere. The job wasn't complicated. Answer calls, help customers, reset passwords, walk them through basic troubleshooting, apologize when the product was genuinely broken, and always end with the survey prompt. You'll be receiving a brief satisfaction survey about today's call. We appreciate your feedback. Most people hung up before I finished the sentence. My metrics were fine. Not great, but fine. Average handle time of 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Customer satisfaction score of 87%. Enough to keep me employed, but not enough to get noticed or anything better. I was professionally invisible, which suited me at the time. The office itself was depressing. Gray cubicles, fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency that gave you headaches, and motivational posters that someone in HR probably thought were inspiring. Every call is an opportunity. Your attitude determines your altitude. That kind of thing. My cubicle was in the middle of the floor, surrounded by 20 other people having 20 other conversations with 20 other frustrated customers. I worked the evening shift, 3 to 11. It meant I never had to wake up early, which was good, but it also meant my sleep schedule was permanently fucked and I never saw my friends. Not that I had many friends left. Most of the people I knew from college had moved away or gotten serious jobs or gotten married. The guys I'd been close with were all coupled up now, doing couple things, and I was the third wheel nobody wanted to invite anywhere. My roommate Derek worked normal hours doing something with data analysis that he'd tried to explain to me once, but I hadn't really understood. We were friendly, we split the bills on time, didn't leave dishes in the sink for more than a day, and occasionally watched a game together if we were both home. But we weren't close. I don't think either of us had the energy for close. The dating thing was getting to me more than I wanted to admit. It had been almost 2 years since my last relationship ended, and every attempt since had gone nowhere. Dating apps were a nightmare of ghosting and one-word responses. The few dates I'd managed to get were awkward and went nowhere. I was starting to wonder if there was something fundamentally wrong with me that everyone else could see, but I couldn't. My mom kept asking if I was seeing anyone. My sister had stopped asking, which was somehow worse. All of this is to say that when the call started, I was already not in a good place. I was lonely, underemployed, and spending 40 hours a week in a fluorescent purgatory helping people solve problems that didn't matter. I was exactly the kind of person who was vulnerable to something latching on. The first call came on a Tuesday in October. I'd just finished helping an older woman figure out why her email wasn't sending. It turned out she had been typing her password wrong for 3 days and was too embarrassed to admit it. I'd been patient with her, walked her through it, and she'd been so grateful that I knew my survey scores were going to get a bump. Small victories. The next call clicked through immediately. No pause, no time to take a breath. The system just dropped me the next person into my headset. Thank you for calling, this is Aaron speaking. Can I get your account number or the phone number associated with your account? There was silence on the other end. Not dead air, but the kind of silence where you can tell someone is there. I could hear breathing. Hello, this is Aaron with customer service. Can you hear me okay? Yes. A male voice, flat effect, no regional accent I could place. I can hear you. Great, what can I help you with today? I'm calling about the satisfaction survey. I glanced at my screen. No account pulled up yet. No call history. Okay, were you calling about a previous interaction? If you want to leave feedback about a recent call, I can transfer you to our survey department. No, the voice said. I'm calling about the survey for the interaction we're having right now. I felt the first little prickle of irritation. Another weirdo. We got them sometimes. People who were high, lonely, or just wanted to mess with customer service reps because they knew we had to be polite. Sir, the survey gets sent after the call ends. If you'd like to provide feedback, you'll receive a text message with a link in about 5 minutes. I'd prefer to do it now, he said. It won't take long, just a few questions. I appreciate that, but that's not how our system works. Is there anything else I can help you with today? On a scale of 1 to 10, the voice continued as if I hadn't spoken. How would you rate your overall experience with the vehicle accident on Route 47? My hand froze on the mouse. I'm sorry, what? The accident on Route 47, the one that will occur on October 19th at approximately 6:23 p.m. How would you rate your overall experience? I think you have the wrong number, I said. My voice came out steady, but my heart had started beating faster. This is technical support for... Were the emergency responders courteous and professional? Sir, I'm gonna have to end this call if... Did you feel that the airbag deployment met your expectations? I hung up, just pressed the disconnect button, and sat there for a second, staring at my monitor. The call timer read 1 minute and 14 seconds. My hands were shaking slightly. What the hell was that? Around me, the call center continued its normal hum. Deb in the next cubicle was laughing at something a customer said. Someone's phone was ringing 2 rows over. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. I took the next call. A guy who couldn't figure out how to update his payment method. Simple, straightforward, done in 4 minutes. I didn't think about the weird call. Except I did think about it. For the rest of my shifts, it kept popping back into my head. The flat voice, the specific details. October 19th at approximately 6:23 p.m., Route 47. When I got home that night, Derek was already asleep. I heated up some leftover pizza and sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, trying to wind down. I opened up the calendar app and looked at October 19th. It was next Friday. I had the day off. I didn't drive on Route 47 often, but it was one of the main roads through town. I'd probably been on it 100 times. There was nothing special about it. I thought about the way the caller had phrased everything, like a survey, like he was asking about something that had already happened. I fell asleep on the couch with the TV on and dreamed about fluorescent lights and ringing phones. The next call came 4 days later, on Saturday morning. I wasn't working. I was at the grocery store, trying to decide if I wanted to spend the extra $2 on the good coffee or stick with the cheap stuff. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I'd been applying to jobs, and there was always the chance it was a recruiter. Hello? Hello, Aaron. This is a brief satisfaction survey regarding your recent experience. Do you have a moment? Same voice. Exact same flat, affectless tone. I was standing in the coffee aisle of a Kroger at 10 in the morning, and my stomach dropped like I'd just gone over the peak of a roller coaster. How did you get this number? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your overall experience with the job interview on November 2nd? What interview? The interview with Merchants and Associates, Conference Room B, 2:30 p.m. I hadn't applied to anywhere called Merchants and Associates. I pulled the phone away from my face and looked at the screen. Unknown number. I put it back to my ear. I don't know what you're talking about. Did you feel the interviewer adequately explain the position requirements? Stop calling me. How likely are you to recommend this interview experience to a friend or colleague? I hung up and immediately blocked the number. My hands were shaking again. An older woman pushing a cart gave me a concerned look as she passed. I realized I was just standing there in the middle of the aisle, breathing hard, probably looking insane. I left my cart and walked out of the store. At home, I sat on my bed and stared at my phone. I unblocked the number and looked at the call history. 2 calls. Tuesday at 9:47 p.m., Saturday at 10:13 a.m. Both listed as unknown number even though I'd blocked it after the second one. I googled Merchants and Associates and got a few results. There was a consulting firm in Chicago, an accounting practice in Boston, and a law office in Denver. None of them were local, and none of them had any jobs posted that matched my background. This was harassment, right? Or a scam? But what was the angle? The guy hadn't asked for money or personal information. He just asked weird survey questions about things that hadn't happened. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Someone called me twice and asked me weird questions? They'd tell me to block the number, which I had already done. I spent the rest of the weekend trying not to think about it. I went to the gym, watched football, ordered Chinese food. Normal weekend stuff. Derek asked if I was okay on Sunday night, and I said I was fine. He looked like he didn't believe me, but he didn't push it. October 19th was on Friday. I didn't drive anywhere that day. I stayed home, told myself I was being ridiculous, and caught up on shows I'd been meaning to watch. At 6:15 p.m., I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Multi-vehicle accident closes Route 47. 2 injured. The timestamp said 6:24. I read it 3 times, then I opened the full article. A 2-car collision at the intersection of Route 47 and Blackwell Road. 1 driver ran a red light, 2 people taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Road expected to be closed for several hours. The sandwich ingredients sat on the counter, forgotten. I read the article again. Then I went to my room and pulled up the call history on my phone. October 15th, 10:13 a.m. How would you rate your overall experience with the vehicle accident on Route 47? The one that will occur on October 19th at approximately 6:23 p.m. 6:23. The accident happened at 6:24. I sat down on the bed because my legs felt weak. This was a coincidence. It had to be. Route 47 was a busy road. Accidents happen there all the time. The fact that this guide called and mentioned an accident and then an accident happened, that was just a coincidence. Okay, my guy, you're in denial. This is like next level denial. Anyways, let's continue. Except he had given me a specific date and the specific time, accurate to within 1 minute. My phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it. 4 rings. 5. I should have let it go to voicemail. I should block it again. I should throw my phone out of the window. I answered. Hello, Aaron. Thank you for your time. This will only take a moment. How did you know? My voice cracked on the last word. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the overall quality of the Thanksgiving dinner at your sister's house? What? The dinner on November 23rd. Did you feel the turkey was cooked to an appropriate temperature? Were your dietary preferences adequately accommodated? I haven't talked to my sister about Thanksgiving yet. How satisfied were you with the seating arrangements? Stop. Just stop. How are you doing this? Would you say the family conversation was appropriate and comfortable, or would you have preferred different topics? Who are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how traumatic would you rate the revelation shared by your father during dinner? My mouth went dry. What revelation? How likely are you to maintain the same relationship with your family after this event? What is he going to say? Click. The call ended. I tried to call back immediately. It rang twice and went to a generic voicemail. The number you have reached is not available. Please leave a message after the tone. I didn't leave a message. I called again. Same thing. I called 5 more times with the same result. I pulled up my family group chat, the last message from 3 days ago. My mom asking if anyone wanted to come over this weekend to help rake leaves. My sister had replied with a leaf emoji and said, I'll be there. I'd sent a thumbs up. Normal family stuff, no drama, no signs that anything was wrong. I called my sister. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted. Hey, what's up? Are you and Tom hosting Thanksgiving this year? Probably. We haven't really decided yet. Mom might do it. Why? Just wondering. Has Dad seemed okay to you lately? Dad? Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I haven't talked to him much. Why? Did Mom say something? No, never mind. Just wanted to check in. Okay, weirdo. Hey, I gotta go. Tom and I are meeting some friends for dinner. Yeah, okay. Have fun. She hung up and I sat there holding my phone, feeling stupid. What had I been expecting her to say? That Dad had some dark secret he was planning to reveal over turkey and stuffing? This was insane. But the accident had happened exactly when the caller said it would. I didn't sleep well that night. Work the next week was a blur. I kept my phone on silent in my locker during shifts and tried not to think about it. My metrics were starting to slip. My average handle time was up almost 8 minutes because I kept losing focus during calls. Customers would be explaining their problems and I'd realize I hadn't been listening for the last 30 seconds. On Wednesday, I got called into my supervisor's office. Tracy was in her early 40s, heavy set, with the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd been working in call centers for way too long. She wasn't mean, but she wasn't particularly warm either. We had a professional relationship that didn't extend beyond the walls of the office. Aaron, I wanted to check in with you. Your numbers have dropped this week. Is everything okay? Yeah, sorry, I've just been distracted. Anything I can help with? I almost laughed. What would I even say? Well, Tracy, I've been getting calls from someone who can predict the future, and he's been asking me survey questions about things that haven't happened yet. Nah, I'm good. I'll get my numbers back up. She looked at me for a long moment. You've been here for 6 months now. You're a solid employee when you're focused, but I need to see that focus come back, okay? Okay. If there's anything going on, personal stuff, you can talk to HR about our EAP program. They have counseling services, that kind of thing. Thanks, I'm fine, really. I wasn't fine. That night, I came home to find an envelope on the floor by our apartment door. My name was written on it in a neat, precise handwriting. No stamp, no return address, just my first name. Derek was in the kitchen cooking something that smelled like garlic and onions. I held up the envelope. Did you see anyone leave this? He glanced over. Nope. Was it there when you got home? Yeah. Probably a neighbor. Maybe they got your package by mistake or something. I turned the envelope over in my hands. It was just a standard white envelope, the kind you can buy in bulk at any office supply store. I thought about not opening it. I thought about throwing it away, or burning it, or taking it to the police station and demanding they do something. Instead, I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, the same precise handwriting filling the page. Satisfaction Survey, Aaron Mitchell. Date, November 2nd, 2024. Time, 2:30 p.m. Location, Merchants and Associates, Conference Room B. Please rate your experience on a scale of 1 to 10. How would you rate the professionalism of the interviewer? Rating 8. Did you feel adequately prepared for the questions asked? Rating 4. How confident are you that this position is a good fit for your skills? 6. How would you rate your overall performance during the interview? 5. How likely are you to accept the position if offered? 9. Additional comments. The interviewer will ask about the gap in your employment from March to August 2023. You will lie about the reason. This will not affect the job offer. You will receive the offer on November 8th. Starting salary will be $52,000, which is $8,000 less than you hoped for, but $12,000 more than you make now. You will accept. I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking so badly, the paper rattled. You good, man? Derek called from the kitchen. Yeah, I managed to say. Just, notice about the package. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed and stared at the paper. March to August 2023. That was when Rachel and I had broken up, and I'd kind of fallen apart. I'd quit my job because I couldn't handle being around people. Spent most of those months in my apartment, playing video games, not answering calls from friends or family. It was the lowest point in my life, and I didn't like to think about it. On my resume, I listed it as freelance consulting, which was technically true because I'd picked up a few gig economy jobs to pay rent. But mostly it was a lie to cover up 6 months of depression. Nobody knew about that except Rachel, and we hadn't spoken since the breakup. I grabbed my laptop and searched for Merchants and Associates again, this time adding my city name. Nothing. I tried different combinations, different searches. Finally, I found it. A small business consulting firm that had apparently just opened a local office 3 weeks ago. Their website was bare bones, still clearly under construction. There was a careers page with a generic email address for inquiries. No posted positions, no job listings on any of the major sites. I sat there for a long time, the letter in one hand, my phone in the other. Then I did something stupid. I sent an email to the careers address. Subject line, inquiry about positions. Body. Hello, I'm a marketing professional with 5 years of experience, looking for new opportunities. I'd be interested in learning more about any current or upcoming positions with your firm. Please let me know if you'd like me to submit my resume. Thank you, Aaron Mitchell. Yeah, he definitely made that with ChatGPT. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Then I went to the kitchen and asked Derek if he wanted to play some video games. He said sure, seemed surprised I was asking, and we spent the next couple hours shooting zombies and not talking about anything important. It was the most normal I'd felt in weeks. The response came the next morning. Dear Aaron, thank you for reaching out. We are in the process of building our team here in the area, and your background sounds like it could be a good fit. Would you be available for an interview on November 2nd at 2:30 p.m.? We're located at 1840 Commerce Street, Suite 300. Please let me know if this works with your schedule. Best regards, Jennifer Casto, HR Manager. I stared at the email on my phone. It was 8:47 a.m. I was sitting in my car in the call center parking lot, 15 minutes before my shift started. November 2nd at 2:30 p.m., Conference Room B. I could not accept this. There's no way I could go to this interview. If I went, that meant the letter was right. That meant all of this was real. That meant someone or something knew what was going to happen before it happened, and for some reason, it was focused on me. I should delete the email. I should block the number again. I should tell someone what was happening. Instead, I replied, "That time works for me. Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to meeting you." What the hell was I doing? The next week and a half for the longest of my life, I went through the motions at work, came home, applied to other jobs, and tried to pretend everything was normal. I didn't get any more calls, no more letters appeared at my door. It was like the whole thing had stopped, which should have been a relief, but somehow made it worse. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I told my supervisor I had a doctor's appointment and needed to leave early on November 2nd. She approved it without any questions. The night before the interview, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through all the possible explanations for what was happening. Scam artist with lucky guesses, stalker with inside information, elaborate prank by someone I'd pissed off, mental breakdown, and none of this was real. Or something else, something I couldn't explain. At 2:15 p.m. on November 2nd, I was sitting in my car outside 1840 Commerce Street. It was a newer office building, glass and steel, the kind of place that looked expensive. I'd worn my interview outfit, the one good suit I owned, and I'd printed out 3 copies of my resume, even though they already had it. I could still leave. I could start the car and drive away and pretend this had never happened. I went inside. The elevator took me to the 3rd floor. Suite 300 had a small reception area with modern furniture and a young guy behind the desk who looked up when I walked in. "Hi, I'm Aaron Mitchell. I have a 2:30 with Jennifer Casto." "Great, have a seat. She'll be right with you." I sat down. The chairs were uncomfortable, and there was a coffee table with some business magazines fanned out across it. Everything smelled new. At exactly 2:30, a woman in her 50s came out and shook my hand. "Aaron, I'm Jennifer. Thanks for coming in. Conference Room B is right this way." Conference Room B. We walked down a short hallway. She opened a door and gestured for me to go in. It was a small room with a table, 4 chairs, and a window that looked out over the parking lot. I could see my car from here. Okay, side note, guys. I know you guys are probably thinking the same thing, but did this guy stop to think for just a moment that maybe whatever this being is helping him? Because first off, it helped him avoid being in a car accident. Now it's helping him get a new job. Like, come on. Anyways, let's continue. The interview was normal. Painfully, aggressively normal. Jennifer asked about my background, my experience, why I was looking for a new opportunity. I answered everything honestly, except for one thing. When she asked about the gap in my employment from March to August 2023, I said I'd been doing freelance consulting work and wanted to transition to something more stable. She nodded and made a note. If she suspected I was lying, she didn't show it. The position was for a junior marketing associate. Client outreach, social media management, some basic analytics. Not exciting, but it was much better than the call center. The salary range was $48,000 to $55,000 depending on experience. We talked for 45 minutes. She asked if I had any questions. I asked a few generic ones about team structure and company culture. She answered them pleasantly, then stood up and shook my hand again. "We're talking to a few candidates this week, but I think you'd be a strong fit. I'll be in touch soon." I thanked her and left. In my car, I sat there breathing hard like I'd just run a mile. My hands were shaking. The interview had happened exactly as the letter said it would. Conference Room B, 2:30 p.m. She'd asked about the gap. I lied. I drove home in a daze. On November 8th, I got a call from Jennifer Casto. They wanted to offer me the position. Starting salary was $52,000. I accepted. Thanksgiving was at my sister's house. I'd thought about not going. I'd thought about a lot of things. Faking sick, telling my family I had to work, getting in my car and driving until I ran out of gas. Anything to avoid what was going to happen. But I went. My sister Amanda and her husband Tom lived in a nice house about 40 minutes away. 2 stories, big yard, the kind of place I'd probably never be able to afford. They'd been married for 4 years and kept making noises about starting a family soon. Tom was a pharmacist, boring but stable. I arrived around 1 in the afternoon. Mom and Dad were already there, along with Tom's parents. Everyone was in a good mood. The house smelled like turkey and pie. Football was on TV. Everything was normal. We ate around 3. Amanda had gone all out with the decorations, fall leaves and little pumpkins everywhere. The table looked like something from a magazine. I sat between my mom and Tom's dad, directly across from my father. Dad looked the same as always. 62 years old, mostly bald, a little overweight, but not too bad. He'd retired from his job at the power company 2 years ago and spent most of his time now working on his boat and complaining about the HOA. He was in a good mood today, telling stories about his fishing trip last month, laughing at Tom's dad's jokes. The food was pretty good. Amanda had outdone herself. We went around the table saying what we were thankful for. Mom talked about her grandkids, hypothetical future ones, a not so subtle jab at Amanda and me. Tom talked about his family. Amanda talked about their house. Dad talked about retirement. I said I was thankful for my new job, which I was starting in 2 weeks. Everything was fine until dessert. We were having pie in the living room, scattered around on various couches and chairs, when Dad put his plate down and cleared his throat. I wanted to talk to you all about something, he said. The room got quiet. Mom looked at him with a little frown. Harold, what is it? Dad looked uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than I'd ever seen him. He cleared his throat again. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I talked to a lawyer a few months ago, just to understand the process. I'm planning to file for divorce. Ooh. The room went completely silent. Amanda's fork clattered on her plate. Mom's face went white. What? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I'm not happy, Janet. Sorry. I'm not happy, Janet. I haven't been happy for a long time. I stayed because the kids were at home, and then I stayed because I thought maybe retirement would make things better, but it hasn't. I want something different for however many years I have left. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My father was sitting there, calmly explaining that he was ending his 35-year marriage. And everyone in the room was staring at him like he just announced he was going to burn the house down. Dad, what the hell? Amanda's voice was shaking. I know this is hard to hear, but I've made up my mind. My mom stood up, her pie plate tumbling to the floor. Pumpkin fillings splattered across the carpet. 35 years, Harold. 35 years, and you're telling me this now, on Thanksgiving, in front of everyone. I thought it would be better to tell the family all at once. Better? You thought this would be better? The argument escalated from there. Voices got louder. Amanda started crying. Tom tried to calm everyone down, which just made it worse. Tom's parents sat frozen on the couch, looking like they wished they could disappear. I just sat there, my piece of pie untouched, watching my family fall apart. At some point I went outside. I stood in Amanda's backyard, breathing cold November air, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the call history. How satisfied were you with the seating arrangements? Would you say the family conversation was appropriate and comfortable? Or would you have preferred different topics? On a scale of 1 to 10, how traumatic would you rate the revelation shared by your father during dinner? He knew. Whoever was calling me, whoever was sending letters, he'd known this was going to happen. He'd known about the accident. He'd known about the job interview. And he'd known about this. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello, Aaron. What do you want from me? I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. This is a brief follow-up survey regarding your Thanksgiving experience. On a scale of 1 to 10, no. No more surveys. You tell me what this is right now, or I'm going to the police. There was a pause. For the first time since this all started, the voice on the other end sounded different. Not quite human. The police can't help you, Aaron. Then what do you want? To inform you, to prepare you. For what? On December 17th at 11:52 p.m., you'll receive a phone call from your mother. She'll tell you that your father has had a heart attack. You'll drive to St. Mary's Hospital. You will arrive at 12:34 a.m. Your father will already be dead. My legs gave out. I sat down hard on the cold ground. No. I'm calling to ask how you would rate your satisfaction with the care he received. Whether you felt the doctors did everything they could. Whether you believe you should have seen the warning signs. You can't know that. You can't know what's going to happen. I know everything that's going to happen to you, Aaron. Every phone call, every letter, every moment of grief and joy and loss. I know when you'll meet your wife. I know the names of your children. I know what you'll be wearing the day you die. Why? Why are you doing this? Because you answered. Most people don't answer. Most people hang up or block the number after the first call, but you answered, and now I can't stop calling. So I'll stop answering. You will answer on December 17th at 11:52 p.m., and you'll answer every call after that, because you need to know, because you humans always need to know. The line went dead. I sat in my sister's backyard for a long time. Through the windows, I could see my family still arguing. My mom was crying, Amanda was yelling at Dad, Tom was on his phone, probably calling someone for advice. All of it playing out exactly as the voice had said it would. I thought about December 17th. I thought about my phone ringing at 11:52 p.m. I thought about knowing, with absolute certainty, what was going to happen and being powerless to stop it. I could throw my phone away. I could change my number. I could move to a different city, a different state. But I knew, the way you always know things in nightmares, that it wouldn't matter. The calls would find me. The letters would find me. Because I had answered, and that was 3 weeks ago. I've tried everything. I've blocked the number dozens of times. I've changed my number twice. I've gone to the police, who told me that there was nothing they could do unless the caller made an actual threat. I've talked to a therapist who suggested I might be experiencing a stress-induced psychotic break. I've tried not answering. The phone just keeps ringing. Sometimes for hours. The longest stretch was 16 hours of continuous calling. I lasted until hour 14 before I picked up. It's always the same voice, always the same format. Satisfaction surveys about things that are going to happen to me. Some of them are minor, a delayed flight, a parking ticket, a bad date with a woman named Michelle, who I haven't met yet. Some of them are worse, an illness, a funeral, a betrayal by someone I trust. The worst part is that I've started to depend on it. When something bad is coming, at least I know. I can prepare. I can brace myself. The calls have become a terrible kind of comfort. My dad is fine right now, by the way. I called him after Thanksgiving, tried to talk to him about taking care of his health. He thought I was overreacting, and we haven't spoken since. December 17th is in 3 weeks. I don't know what I'm going to do when my phone rings at 11:52 p.m. I don't know if I should try to warn my dad or spend the time between now and then trying to appreciate what's left. I don't know if anything I do will matter. The worst part is that I keep checking my phone, waiting for the next call, waiting for the next survey, because at least then I'll know what's coming. At least then I won't have to wonder. My phone is ringing right now. Unknown number. I know what he's going to ask before I even answer. How satisfied are you with the way your life has changed since you answered the first call? I'm going to answer it. I always do. Because us humans always need to know. All right, it's the beginning of the movie. Movie intro just ended and they're cutting into the beginning. Dun, da, 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 da. All right, I'm not going to do that. A guy's sitting at his desk, answering a phone call at his call center job that he hates that he still has. And then someone just happens to be telling him the future and all these terrible events that are going to happen. Yeah, no, that sounds like a horror movie. The next story today is by the talented Trash Tia from r/Scary Stories. I'm pretty sure the cheer squad at my college are being used as weapons. I was a freshman and I wanted community, friends. I heard the cheer squad were just an extracurricular group rather than an actual major level class, so I figured I'd give them a shot. It's not like I could ignore them. On my first day moving into my dorm room, I must have walked into the same girl 3 times. I firmly believe it's not possible for a human being to be permanently happy, and yet that was her. She wandered around like the sun shone right out of her ass, and it was both endearing and terrifying. The girl resembled the sun herself, a halo of golden curls held back in a scrunchie, a flaunting sundress, and matching ribbons wrapped around her wrists. The Sunbeam squad were easy to spot because they were all wearing insanely bright yellow, waving around gold streamers with ribbons tangled in their hair. They all spoke in insanely high-pitched voices like they inhaled helium for a living, but that must have been their shtick, right? It was kinda cute. I wasn't expecting such a welcome in the shape of guys and girls looking like they had just stepped off an ABC Kids set. The girl who handed me a flyer and yelled in my face about school spirit was practically hopping up and down, a bright grin splitting her lips apart. I nodded and smiled politely, stuffing the flyer into my bag and heading into my room to finish moving my stuff in. When I looked out the window a few hours later, the Sunbeam squad were still threaded through the crowd, each of them wrapped in glittering fairy lights illuminated by the late evening sunset glow. Sunbeam. Yeah, I got it, but it was still kind of overkill. They were starting to remind me of a cult. That, however, didn't stop me trying out. I'm fairly athletic, and they were exactly what I wanted. I've never really had a group of people I could call friends. Though it's not like I could blame anyone but myself. I was a shut-in for most of high school. I either worked or preferred my own company in my room. One of my biggest regrets is pushing people away, friends I wanted to get even closer to. Because now they had built these lifelong friendships and relationships, and I was stuck at 18 years old with nobody but childhood friends I spoke to once a year when we sent mutual holiday greetings to each other. But college could change that. At least, that's what I hoped. I spoke to as many people as possible on my first day, and in my head, I was making them. Slowly but surely, I was actually making friends in my classes, people I wanted to hang out with. Sunbeam was my attempt to go even further and join a club. Through word of mouth during my first few weeks of classes, I learned they were more of an extracurricular group for fun. They didn't cheer competitively and had been formed in the mid-90s by some kids who wanted to create a community built around positivity and school spirit. Sunbeam had a reputation for being Watson State's beacons, the team's good luck charm. It was well known across campus that the squad was the reason behind the college's fortune. It had been like that since they formed 30 years ago, with members through the generations carrying out that pledge to spread as much pep as possible. While I say they seem nice, judging from what I heard from others, they weren't exactly the easiest clique to get into, unless you were already on the squad. I saw them around campus between classes. They always moved as a group, the 6 of them with their arms wrapped around each other, brandishing the school colors. The guys wore loose-fitting varsity jackets, while the girls flaunted their cheer skirts. The way they acted was a little too close, like they were more than friends. And community and friendship had bled into something else, like they had just walked out of an early 2000s teen movie. Not that I was complaining, I mean, their style was intriguing. They were like this untouchable group of gods placed on the highest pedestals. They ruled over campus, which made me want to get to know them even more. So I tried out, which was my first mistake of many during freshman year. It didn't hit me that I was in way over my head until I was standing in the college gym in front of a 4-person panel like I was auditioning for a Hollywood movie. Sunbeam took their tryouts incredibly seriously, which was weird considering they were known to be the complete opposite. There were maybe 50 applicants, and we had to stand near the back wall and watch others try out one by one, which was already setting off my anxiety. Weren't they supposed to be closed tryouts only? Initially, I was excited. I had my routine in my head, what I had learned from watching the squad at my old school. High V, low V, followed by a touchdown, and then a backflip. I was confident. I mean, it ticked most cheer moves off the list and even had a flip to complete the routine. My high school was a mixed squad, so I learned a lot from watching the guys' moves during pep rallies. I wasn't really worried about the quality of the moves since they were known for not taking everything too seriously. But watching the others try out, doing impossible flips without crash mats and twisting their bodies in ways I didn't know were possible, I quickly realized I was screwed. My competitors were acting like they were auditioning for an Olympic level team. My gut was dancing when I took the center stage. The panel was made up of 4 members of the squad, 2 boys and 2 girls, including the blonde who handed me the flyer on my first day. I was surprised when her eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh, I know you," she squeaked, leaning forward. Her smile seemed to brighten, illuminating her features. All 4 of them seemed to emanate a warm glow. I felt myself relax slightly, the knot in my stomach loosening. Maybe their heightened positivity thing wasn't a shtick after all. The girl, as well as the other members of the team, seemed genuinely happy to see me trying out. "What's your name?" Her voice reverberated off the walls, and I suddenly became aware of the dozens of other students watching me. "Alex," I said, offering a shy wave. "Hey." Still grinning, she nudged the redhead next to her playfully. The guy was like no one I'd ever seen before. He was a goddamn traffic light. He was easy to spot in a crowd, and was usually one of the low-key members who kept his head down. All those colors painted across him, and yet, somehow, he wasn't blinding people. Though, admittedly, they suited him. Bright red hair clashed with the blue and gold of his football jersey. His pasty skin and dark eyes drinking me in while the blonde girl tugged on his sleeve. "See, I told you annoying freshmen would work." In response, he chuckled, rolling his eyes. "Whatever you say, Evie." The guy straightened up, leaning his chin on his fist, a curious spark in his eyes. "All right." Twisting around in his chair, he signaled for music. When it started, the beat slammed into me, rumbling beneath my feet. "Let's see what you've got." I'm not going to describe my routine because I don't have time to explain how bad I was. In my head, I was doing okay. I was ready to finish with my backflip, but the music abruptly cut off, and I found myself struggling to catch my breath with my hands in the air, panting like an idiot. The blonde maintained her smile, but it was slightly strained. I could tell she was struggling to keep up the facade of a Sunbeam member while also retaining critical thinking. The redhead looked like he was in pain. He was the first to speak, and I could tell by his sympathetic smile that I'd screwed up. The others, who I hadn't fully taken in until that moment, an Asian American guy and a girl with pigtails, were laughing like preschoolers. They didn't stop until the redhead shot them a warning look. Weirdly enough, the crowd of onlookers didn't join in. I expected the redhead to politely tell me I sucked, but instead he cocked his head, chewing on his pen. "You're good," he said. "You're a good dancer, and I liked your moves." He trailed off, but it's positivity we're looking for, and you didn't smile once during your whole routine, which made you look stiff, like you weren't even enjoying it. He shrugged helplessly. "I like you, and I like your dancing. I'm sure you could be even better if you worked on it. There are countless dance clubs here, so maybe you'd be better suited there." After exchanging a look with the blonde, he sighed. "Unfortunately, you're not the type of person we're looking for." Evie nodded. "I agree. We pride ourselves on staying positive and smiling. I didn't see that in you, Alex." "Same here." Pigtails, still giggling, joined in. "I don't think you've got enough school spirit." The other guy scoffed. He looked to be of Korean descent. Unlike the redhead, he was always at the center of their group, always joking around and laughing. Just looking at him told me he was the leader. "Bullshit." He slapped the table with one hand, running the other through his thick dark hair. "I liked it. Screw Pep, am I right?" He threw his pen at the blonde, who retaliated with a squeak, lobbing hers back at him. "Ignore these clowns. I think you've got what it takes. We've just got to work on you, you know? All you're missing is a cheesy grin." He pointed to himself, stretching his lips into the widest smile he could muster. "See? Like this." "Clowns?" Evie shook her head. "I didn't see one smile. Sunbeam is all about smiling." "You make us sound like a cult." The Korean American guy caught my eye. Which we're not, by the way. These guys are just scared of change. "Okay, that's too far." Pigtails shot him a scowl. "Are you seriously disrespecting the alumni who created us, who birthed us?" Well, yeah. He threw his paper at her. Sunbeam is a pep cult. We get high off happiness. I thought we established that. Take that back. Never. Why do you think I joined? To get high. Do you really think I joined for the cheering? They were joking around. I could tell by the smiles on their faces. A smile I knew I would never be able to mimic. Quiet. The redhead shushed them. The guy had been sitting silently, studying me. He leaned back, folding his arms. See, even now, even when I'm considering giving you a chance, there's no hope in your eyes. Not even a glitter of excitement. You're still not smiling, and that's what we want, Alex. We want people who will embody what Sunbeam is all about. Even if I give you a second chance to brighten up your routine, your smile will be fake, and that's not what we want. We want people who are willing to shed their humanity and become beacons. Beacons, huh? And they were seriously saying they weren't a cult. The redhead stabbed at his sheet of paper with the end of his pen. Can't you just give us one smile? It won't kill you. That was when the others started laughing, and I wanted to punch the asshole in the face. Dude, chill. The Korean American played with his pen, twirling it between his fingers. He's right. As much as I hate saying it, we do need smilers, unfortunately. But hey, you can try out next year. Just remember to smile, all right? He threw something at me, a squash candy bar, which somehow made me look even more pathetic. I found myself nodding, even when I knew it was all bullshit. Still, what each member had told me hit harder than it should have. They were just words. What could they do? It turned out words were far more powerful than I realized. I just didn't know it yet. I didn't wait for the others to speak and made a quick getaway, my gut twisting and turning. They were a cult. That's what I decided. These guys were a cult who needed members willing to throw away their souls, probably for ritualistic sacrifice. They needed weak people, I thought, even when part of me knew they were right. I wasn't a smiler. Every photo I'm in, I'm either frowning or look constipated. Still, I didn't dwell on the tryouts for too long. By the time a week had gone by, I had mostly forgotten about it and threw myself into studies and college life. Though something was wrong with me. It was as if the world had slowed down, had stopped making sense completely. Every day felt like a dream, and I felt like a ghost, like I was dissociating from my own body. Conversations with people felt fake, like I was making them up. I remember waking up day after day in a daze I couldn't pull myself out of. It was only several weeks later that the thick mind fog blanketing my mind finally lifted. Only for me to hear the news that all 6 members of the Sunbeam Squad had disappeared. I don't know how I didn't notice, how I didn't see the police investigation or hear rumors spreading around like a wildfire. According to the college, it wasn't technically considered a disappearance since the members were all over 18 and no longer minors. However, an investigation was conducted with a statement released saying they were due to perform at Knoxville College, cheering on our team. But they never turned up. And what made it worse was their bus had been found abandoned on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. Sounds bad, right? Well, that's what we all thought. Vigils were already being held, and bodies hadn't even been found yet. Every time I walked back to my dorm after classes, the night glowed with warm golden light, candles flickering in the breeze. I'm not sure how many days went by. They all blurred together. Then our college made another statement. The members of the Sunbeam Squad were alive and healthy and had been sent to a training academy for professionals. When the student body responded with confusion and skepticism, the college reassured us that they would return once they were finished training. And while my classmates were relieved, I found myself confused. Sunbeam didn't cheer competitively. Their whole thing was spreading cheer and pep regardless of how good they were. I'd seen them perform, and they were good, sure. Better than average, but definitely not good enough to be trained into pros. Their moves were too clumsy, too half-assed, which I was convinced they thought overwhelming positivity could somehow fix. So it didn't make sense that they had been sent to some elite training academy. I kept up my skepticism until I saw them for myself. The college was right. Sunbeam returned a week later like nothing had happened. I did notice a change in them. I think everyone did. Sunbeam were known for their pep and cheer, their constant smiling faces that drove me crazy, and it's not like that stopped. They still smiled. They still wandered around campus laughing together in their own little world. That was when people were watching. When they didn't have an audience, though, they detached from each other. Their eyes darkened, expressions twisting like each of them could smell something rotting in the air. I started noticing they were getting progressively clumsier at keeping up the sunbeam facade they must have pledged themselves to when they joined the group. I figured it was just exhaustion. They must have been through intense training. Anyways, months passed. I started feeling less distant, and the fog choking me faded, finally. I started junior year moving into a shared house with my roommate, and the only thing I heard about Sunbeam was that one of their ex-members was rumored to be pregnant. As for the rest of the squad, they were still popular, still talked about, but their disappearance had definitely made people wary of them. I even heard someone say they were considered bad luck. I guess people thought they had sold themselves out for a chance to make it into the big leagues. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. Forced positivity can get you far, sure, but recognition can get you further. It was just a few weeks ago when I was invited to a game, our first of the season after delays caused by cuts to the sports department. I'm not much of a sports fan, but I needed a distraction from the mountain of assignments piling up on my desk. When I sat down with a chili dog and Coke, I wasn't expecting to get so invested in a game where I had no clue what was happening. It was loud and obnoxious, and I was choking on the stink of fried food, but it was fun. It was fun until Sunbeam walked out onto the sidelines. I glimpsed them in a blur of blue and gold, and a dull pain crawled across the back of my head. "You okay?" My housemate's voice was barely distinguishable when I found myself transfixed by the way they moved in erratic jumps, quickly taking position. They had gotten better. Everything that made Sunbeam what it was had been stripped away. Their smiles were forced, wrong. I remembered how they used to push and shove each other, making the crowd laugh. Now they moved in near perfect sync, no longer shaky or stumbling into each other. Their routine was longer than usual, and when the Korean-American guy perfected a triple flip, the crowd went insane. I expected him to smile when he landed, grinning into the audience to generate the kind of energy Sunbeam thrived on, but his expression stayed stoic, robotic. They were stiff, heads up, back straight, staring ahead. I had been told during tryouts that fake smiles weren't allowed, and yet that was all I was seeing. Egotistical grins, curled lips, quick glances between each member. I expected reassuring looks and inside jokes only they understood. Instead, it looked like a mutual agreement, something they were planning. And from the looks on their faces, it wasn't a fireworks show. Sunbeam used to generate happiness. Their smiles, even beneath the facade, had once been real. Now they emanated power. The way they stood. The guys at the front preparing what I guessed was a lift. The girls balancing on top of them. Their routine ended with the music reaching a climax. The two main girls raised high in the air while performing high V's. But they didn't stop there. When the crowd exploded with applause, one of the girls slowly raised her arms and shot finger guns into the audience. She fired twice, and every time she pulled the imaginary trigger, her painted lips stretched into a maniacal grin, until her gaze landed on me, and then behind me. I could see it in her glittering eyes I could no longer call human. I met Evie at the start of freshman year, and again during the disastrous tryouts. I knew her wide smile and the glint of passion twisting her expression, a love for the group and its members she couldn't put into words. But right then, I wasn't seeing Evie, a Sunbeam cheerleader. I was seeing something else entirely. A being scanning faces in the crowd for a victim. Her expression melted from gleeful delight into something twisted and putrid. Someone craving the exact opposite of everything Sunbeam preached. I watched her lips. I watched the words form silently, drowned out by the crowd's cheering. But I saw them clearly. Drop. She said it before pulling the imaginary trigger again. No sooner had the word left her mouth than someone screamed behind me. I twisted around to see a guy collapsed on the ground. He was pronounced dead 5 minutes later by his sobbing girlfriend who had attempted CPR. When I turned back to the field, the Sunbeam Squad were gone. It didn't make sense that they could have caused the guy's death, but it couldn't have been a coincidence, right? Evie had fired into the crowd at the exact moment he dropped dead. Finger guns weren't weapons, obviously, but the timing was too perfect. I already knew there was something wrong with Sunbeam. Obviously, when I tried to tell people this, I was called crazy, delusional. I reported it to the student information building and got nothing but a blank stare. The woman wasn't even attempting to hear my story. She heard murder and Sunbeam, and her lips curved into an amused smirk. You know, you are quite fascinating. Leaning back in her chair, the woman frowned at me through wonky glasses. First, you unexpectedly quit, and then you accused them of murder, which I can tell you is false. She flipped through a notebook in front of her. According to the autopsy report released a few days ago, the young man died of a brain hemorrhage, not the result of being pretend shot by a cheerleader miming finger guns. The woman cleared her throat. Tell me, what exactly do you have against the Sunbeam Squad? What? You quit the squad at the end of your freshman year, she said, and now you're trying to accuse them of murder? Fascinating. Her words struck me, a shiver sliding down my spine. The office was cozy, and when I sank into the rich leather couch in front of a roaring fire, I recognized the book on her desk. It was a dog-eared copy of Harry Potter. I'd seen it before, but that was impossible. I had never been in her office. Quit? I shook my head. No, I don't. I trailed off, stumbling over my words. I've never been a part of Sunbeam. Were you not? She shook her head, a crease forming between her brows. Ah, I must be getting you mixed up with someone else. I nodded. Just, can you listen to me? That Evie girl was fucking... She cut me off. Language. Sorry, Evie, she was... I don't know what she was doing. It was like magic. Are you sure you didn't dream it? Yes. The woman cleared her throat, dismissing my protests. I'm not a doctor, but if you're experiencing memory loss and confusion, I suggest going to the hospital. As for your ludicrous claims, you should keep them to yourself. That poor young man died from a brain hemorrhage. Terrible and tragic, yes, but accidental and not the work of... She tilted her head. I'm sorry, what exactly were you claiming it to be? Magic, I said again. When she raised a brow, I couldn't resist groaning. I saw her. She shot into the crowd and mouthed something. She mouthed something. Yes, but... Again, her words sliced into mine. Okay, let's say you were right, she said. If this girl shot into the crowd with her imaginary gun, wouldn't it be a gunshot wound that killed him? You said it yourself. It was some kind of witchy magic, so where was the bullet wound? Exactly. There wasn't one, because the man suffered a hemorrhagic stroke, and nothing could be done to save him. Your claims that a group of teenagers carried this out as a murder are not only blatant defamation, but also deeply disrespectful to the young man and his family. Now, please leave my office. I don't want to discuss this anymore. The woman nodded toward the door. I think you've been watching too much TV. Might I suggest focusing on your studies? I left her office, slamming the door behind me. My housemate wasn't much help when I told him. He said I was maybe a little too obsessed with Sunbeam. He headed to work, and I ended up in the lounge trying to focus on an episode of Criminal Minds, but I couldn't stop thinking about Evie. I saw what she said. Drop. But it wasn't the force of her imaginary finger guns ricocheting back. It was the word itself. Drop. It had been alive on her lips, like a sentient thing bleeding into existence. I eventually fell asleep, twisted like a pretzel in my housemate's favorite chair, only for 3 loud knocks on the door to tear me from my slumber. I was on my feet immediately, blinking in confusion. We almost never got visitors. Stumbling toward the door, I hesitated. I imagined Evie standing on the other side. I imagined her raising her arm and shooting her pretend finger guns directly into my head. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find 3 little kids. The youngest couldn't have been older than 9. To my surprise, they were dressed in Halloween costumes. There was a little witch, a ghost, and a scarecrow, all carrying pumpkin-shaped candy buckets. It took me a moment to realize I was staring at trick-or-treaters. It wasn't even mid-October yet. Hey there, I said. You guys are a little early. The little girl's eyes were wide and unblinking. "We want candy," she said, holding out her bucket. "Now." I decided to be firm. "It's not Halloween." I took a small step back, tightening my grip on the door handle, ready to slam it shut. These little shits were freaking me out. It wasn't just their tone, their expressions were completely vacant. There were no lights on behind their eyes, and that terrified me. "Sorry, kids, I don't have any candy. But like I said, come back when it's actually Halloween, and I'll have candy bars for all of you." What I wasn't expecting was for the scarecrow to pull a knife from his pumpkin bucket. He didn't hold it clumsily like a child would. There was something deliberate in the way his fingers wrapped around the handle, like he'd held one before. The kid pressed the knife to his own throat and made a slicing motion. Like the little girl, his eyes were blank and unblinking. Something was wrong with the way he stood. Stiff, puppet-like. "Are you kidding me?" He squeaked out a laugh. I didn't even see him lunge. I was already stumbling backwards, losing my footing. The kid moved with impossible speed, and before I knew what was happening, the hilt of the knife was buried in my lower leg. I didn't even feel the pain at first. My body was fueled entirely by adrenaline, pushing me to get away from him. I remember falling backwards. I remember my trembling hands wrapping around the handle and yanking the knife free. Red spilled down my jeans and splattered across the hardwood floor. The kids turned and sprinted down the steps into the night, and I watched them in a daze. They didn't move normally. They stalked down the sidewalk like video game characters. The witch shoved a passing old man before pulling out a gun and pointing it at his head, but she didn't shoot. The three of them ran off, and it was only when I watched the tip of the witch's hat disappear into the darkness that I caught sight of something in the corner of my eye. Before I heard laughter. The tree in front of me moved. At first, I thought they were shadows. Then the shadows bled into figures. 4 of them. I caught flashes of the school colors, blue and gold, twin ponytails, velvet blonde hair, the unmistakable sunbeam varsity jacket. The group laughed and whispered among themselves, not exactly making much effort to hide. When they stepped out from behind the tree, I recognized Evie immediately. Her fingers were pressed gingerly against her nose, while thick red pooled down her chin. The others were the same, swiping at their faces with jacket sleeves. They didn't seem fazed. The redhead's gaze stayed latched onto the retreating children, his lips curling into a grin. I could sense he was still tethered to them, still commanding them to act out Grand Theft Auto. They had caused the man's death through the game, controlling those children like puppets. I wasn't crazy or delusional. Evie had killed someone by shooting imaginary finger guns, and somehow the others were able to bleed into children's heads and take them over. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I heaved out a breath. The pain was starting to hit in waves I had to grit through. I couldn't move. I was stuck curled on the floor while they laughed. I was halfway through punching 911 into my phone when one of them came over. The Korean American. The one who had been the nicest to me out of all of them. The genuine smile I remembered was gone, replaced by something inhuman. Something I didn't want to question. With his hand shoved into his varsity jacket pockets, he approached me with mocking eyes, almost like he was trying to mimic his old self. The guy knelt in front of me with a chuckle. Kids these days, right? They're animals. His voice, no, his words hurt me. I felt each one penetrate me like gunshots. My wound wasn't bad, at least that's what I estimated. I didn't think the kid had hit anything vital, but I needed the emergency room. One hand still clamped over my side, drenched in red. I managed to hiss, reaching for my phone when he snatched it from my grasp and waved it in the air. "Screw off, what did you do to those kids?" I gritted out, trying to grab my damn phone. The pain in my side was getting worse. It hurt like a motherfucker. Dizzying bolts of electricity crashing through me like waves of boiling water. I tried to get onto my knees, but he shoved me back down. The guy cocked his head, confusion creasing his expression. "Ouch, that must hurt." What did you do?" I hissed. His presence was hurting me. Every time he opened his mouth, it was agony. Somehow, it was worse than the stab wound. This pain was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. The kind I'd rather die than experience. A cry clawed its way up my throat. Fight or flight taking over. Again, I tried to move, tried to get away from him. But he pinned down my arms and prodded at my side before sticking his finger into the cut and twisting. I didn't do anything, Alex. His voice barely hit me before my vision blurred and I screamed. Like an animal, I screamed. But not because his fingers were digging around inside me. My brain was suddenly boiling, a metal rod piercing my skull and stirring it into soup. His voice was inside my brain, bleeding into me, taking me over. But it wasn't just his voice. The world blurred around me, and suddenly I wasn't in my doorway anymore, bleeding against the wall. I was moving, walking. No, being dragged. Except these weren't my memories. This wasn't my mind. I could see bare feet beneath me, slapping softly against white tiles. When I looked up, there was only white stretching ahead of me, like I was being led straight into the clouds. This was a building, glass doors, electronic panels, people in black guarding each entrance. It took a while for me to regain my senses, or maybe for him to regain his. We could smell the chlorine and taste rusty coins at the back of our throat, feel the freezing tiles against our bare feet. There was a strange sensation at the back of our head. We kept wanting to run our fingers through our hair, but every attempt only touched bare skin. Scuffed, uneven skin. Tight fingers were wrapped around our arm, dragging us deeper into the white oblivion until a glass door appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. From now on, I'm going to describe his memories vaguely. I'm only going to tell you what I saw. The room reminded me of a classroom, except there were no desks. The other members of Sunbeam stood pressed against the back wall, staring straight ahead, their eyes fixed on nothing, but I could see them trembling, terrified. The squad wore pale white shorts and t-shirts stained with ugly red splatters. Glitter still clung to their faces, ribbons hung from bedraggled curls. Their feet were bare and filthy, just like ours. When we were shoved forward, we took our place beside Evie, who had half her hair shaved off. Her arms were folded over her cheer uniform, her bare feet tapping against the floor. A woman with dark red hair tied in a severe ponytail stepped into the room and asked if either of us wanted to show her what we'd learned. Evie eagerly raised her hand. Okay, Evie. The woman's voice was too sweet, sickly sweet. She gestured her forward. Show us what you got. The door opened and a man stepped inside. His hands were tied in front of him, his eyes empty. Evie nodded, determination burning in her expression. She cleared her throat. Shatter. Nothing happened. Intent, Evie, the woman corrected. It doesn't matter how you say the word unless you use proper intent. Try again. The girl growled in frustration. Shatter. The man's head flew from his torso in a river of red, and the girl squealed in excitement. While we watched in horror, the rest of the squad slowly surrendered to despair. Different days bled together. Faces changed. Heads were shaved. Hair grew back. Fear turned into joy. A blonde girl exploded into bloody chunks that splattered across the walls. Yes, the redhead yelled, high-fiving pigtails before launching into some bizarre handshake. That's what I'm talking about. Bang, one of the girls cried, forming finger guns. With every shot, innocent people dropped against the wall, one by one, their skulls blown apart. She bounced excitedly on her toes. Bang, bang, bang. Keep going. The woman's voice crackled through a speaker. You've almost got it. Divide. Pigtails pointed at an old man who was instantly torn apart by an invisible force. Wet chunks of him slamming onto the floor. Show off, the redhead sang. He lounged against the black wall, using his jersey to wipe blood from his face while the others painted the room scarlet. With simple words and hand gestures, they could tear people apart piece by piece. Pigtail snorted when another test subject was dragged in. Oh, you think you can do better? Think I can, the redhead laughed. I know I can. This time he jammed 2 fingers against his temples. The others stood against the wall with folded arms while he stepped into the center of the room. Rip it out. The subject's eyes widened. Trembling hands clawed at her own skull, fingernails shredding flesh. Rip it out? His lip curled. That's what I said. We never saw her rip her own brain from her head. We were already curled up with our forehead pressed to the floor, screaming into our knees. Another flash, another scene. This time we were slicing into our wrists with shards of glass, pulling back strips of flesh to reveal 2 wires tangled through muscle and bone. One red, one blue. "Why won't you submit?" a sharp voice snarled. Our body was strapped to metal restraints. Out of all of them, you refuse it. A hand cracked across our face. "You don't want it." He started laughing. "You don't want control?" He leaned closer. "Tell me to mutilate myself. Tell me to tear out my own brainstem. That's the beauty of it. No matter how impossible the order is, it will be completed. Control, my boy. Use it. Do you understand how much you're going to shape this world? Words. Do you know how powerful they are? Spoken from the right mouth, with the right intent, they can cause bloodshed, pain, misery, despair drowning our already shattered earth. And you will stand at the center of it. You will bring this world to its knees, Jason. Now do it. We call it cutting, but you might find it easier to call it eraser. Make up your own word if you want. The only thing that matters is intent." Something sliced into our arm. It wasn't medical. It was torture. He drove something sharp into the wound and twisted until we threw our head back and screamed at the ceiling. "You're the last one," the man hissed. "Do it." "No." His voice, our voice, cracked apart. I can't. Do it." He dragged us down another long corridor until we reached a second room. "Drown." Jason's voice suddenly echoed inside my skull. I could feel him resisting it, trying to hold back the force behind his own words, but the command kept slipping free. "Drown, drown, drown, drown." We stood in the doorway of a smaller room. In the corner, a figure sat curled against the wall. A guy. I recognized our school colors immediately. A blood-stained varsity jacket over shorts and a t-shirt. When he lifted his head and turned toward us, my breath caught in my throat. He looked exactly like me. No, it was me. His eyes were hollow and haunted. My mother's eyes stripped of everything human. Like someone had hollowed him out and left behind a shell. As suddenly as the memories came, they were ripped away. I blinked hard, and Jason looked just as confused as I felt. Slowly, he pulled his finger from my wound. The man's voice still echoed inside my skull, agonizing and relentless. I could feel the command clawing through my nervous system, my body preparing to obey something that didn't even exist anymore. "This was just a trick," he muttered. "Yeah, just a trick." I found myself nodding automatically. "Just a trick," I whispered. Blood spilled from my nose, splattering down my chin. "Louder," he ordered. "Just a trick," I screamed. The force of the words dropped me to my knees. I panted against the floor while Jason frowned down at me. Suddenly uncertain, he wrapped my wound and told me it wasn't bad, and somehow it wasn't. I watched in disbelief as my skin slowly stitched itself back together. "Go into your kitchen," Jason said. The command ripped through me like bullets. My body moved on its own. I stumbled into the kitchen while he followed behind me, grabbing a scarf from the table. "Get on your knees." I obeyed instantly, collapsing onto the floor with my breath trapped in my throat. I could sense the others standing in the doorway as he tied the scarf over my eyes. The heel of his shoe slammed into the back of my neck, forcing me flat against the ground. "I want you to wait for me to kill you." The words buried themselves deep inside me, so I waited. Even after they left, even after the door slammed shut, I waited until morning. Only then did control slowly return to my body, enough for me to rip the scarf from my eyes. But I'm still waiting. My brain is trapped in constant panic. I jerk around whenever I'm alone, checking every corner, every shadow. I was dragged to Friday's game against Harrington. During Sunbeam's routine, they did it again. They had the crowd's full attention while Evie mouthed something I couldn't hear. I felt her words anyway, sharp as needles slicing into me, but they didn't fully penetrate. They've done something to the student body. Ever since then, I've caught people staring at me. Those whose minds they've crawled inside, blank, mindless eyes. Every so often, someone brushes against me, fingers wrap around my throat. I hear footsteps trailing behind me. Those little kids from that night. I keep seeing the little witch girl in the corner of my eye. They're building an army, waiting for the moment Jason decides to kill me. If I only knew what happened to the Sunbeam Squad, maybe I could help them somehow. But something tells me they're far beyond help. And so am I. Sometimes I wonder if one day I'll finally be allowed to remember what really happened to me during freshman year, and why, ever since entering Jason's mind, I dream of a white room. This one was absolutely insane, and I feel like I saved one of the best for last. This and the Unalloyed St. Trina one were two amazing stories. Harmless Cheer Squad has actually been transformed into a living weapon capable of killing people and controlling people. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed these stories as much as I did, and yeah, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.